television or even you're looking down the street, do you have to sometimes battle your old prejudices?
For years after I condemned white nationalism, I did struggle with exactly what you're talking about, this sense that how do I decide what I believe because I thought I was right before. And it wasn't something that made me question anti-racism, it was something that made me question my own sense of convictions.
So perhaps your parents haven't started thinking yet?
They haven't changed their community. They know me, but their community is white nationalists, and I think as long as that's the case, there's no reason for somebody to challenge their own beliefs.
Derek Black, thank you for being with us on Hard Talk. Your book is called The Klansman's Son, My Journey from White Nationalism to Anti-Racism. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, it's raining in downtown Winnipeg, and a shocker. We knew it was coming again, and so it has begun. Good morning, everyone, on a wet morning, Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. It's 3 minutes to 6 a.m., and we're with you till 8:37 with the morning show, so thanks for spending some time with us here on CBC. Let's say good morning to the team. Corey Funk makes his triumphant return. Corey is our studio director. We'll be covering the commute on air. Hi, Corey. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who's behind our controls and our beyond being our technical producer, covers the weather on the air. Kevin Nepatebo and Brad Lillies. Good morning, you two. Also in the control room this morning, covering our YouTube channel. So let's talk a little bit more about the day that's coming. We have the rain that's going to be staying with us for Winnipeg today, and then a mix of sun and cloud late this afternoon, and a risk of a thunderstorm, though, this morning before that's through. So 5 to 10 millimeters in this system in total, and our high in Winnipeg is going to be 21 degrees. Also, some showers over in Brandon and up in Thompson. A 60% chance you'll see some rain this afternoon as well. Heather Wells is in also today. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba politicians might be feeling a little bit groggy. They burned the midnight oil, sitting past midnight as more than 20 bills went to a final vote before the legislature began its summer break. Among the bills passed is one ending the province's ban on homegrown recreational cannabis. But some major bills did not pass. We'll hear about that. And the RCMP detachment in Manitoba's biggest northern city has 13 vacancies. That's according to a policing report presented to Thompson's mayor and council. And we'll hear the concerns in Manitoba's biggest northern city coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, of course, with us throughout the morning with headlines, with full casts at the bottom of the hours. Also, today on the show, let's have a look at what's coming up. We're going to take a look at the Angus Reid Institute's latest poll. They were trying to understand how Canadians feel about encampments on university campuses, like the one I can see through our studio window here, just on the lawn of University of Winnipeg next door. So we'll hear more about what that poll had to say. In addition, this morning on the program, Mexico has its first female president, woman president, that we were hearing about yesterday. But we're going to get some local reaction from a member of our Manitoba Mexican community.
On Q with Tom Power.
You might know Dan Brown from writing best-selling books like The Da Vinci Code, but did you know he's also a musician? Dan put out a kids' book tied to classical compositions he wrote, and now he's performing it with a New Brunswick Kids Orchestra. He'll be here to talk to you about music and why New Brunswick.
I mean, these people are making a change. I said, well, how could I possibly say no?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel-Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The latest report into foreign interference in Canadian elections is sending shockwaves through Ottawa, and we are watching to see what Justin Trudeau's cabinet ministers have to say when they meet later this morning. The report from a committee of MPs and senators laid out some disturbing revelations, including that some politicians were knowing participants in foreign election meddling. Let's go to our parliamentary reporter, Janice McGregor. Janice, you have been reading this report closely. What stands out the most?
Marcia, the chair of Parliament's National Security Committee, David McGuinty, told CBC News they agonized over what to say, specifically about their fellow parliamentarians who are, in the words of CSIS, witting participants, helping foreign governments meddle. Things like talking to foreign missions around campaigns to mobilize community groups or businesses that the diplomats are engaged with, accepting funding where the actual foreign source of the money is concealed, and perhaps most troubling, giving information to a known foreign intelligence officer. No charges have been laid, but the report notes that at least some of it could be illegal were authorities to crack down on it. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc told Power and Politics last night, this goes beyond what he can control as a government minister.
I'm not able to police the calendar of some MP or senator who decides to have a meeting with a foreign diplomat.
This report also gave us more detail about India's meddling than we've got at the public inquiry so far. It describes how CSIS has tracked a known Indian proxy that claims to have transferred money from India to politicians at all levels of government in return for what was described as political favors. And yet, this information apparently has never been shared with the RCMP or elections investigators.
We also learned about more meddling in another political process, the selection of a politician who could become the next Prime Minister of Canada. Tell us about that.
Now, it's significantly redacted, but this report reveals that there were two specific instances where the People's Republic of China had officials that were interfering in leadership races, plural, of the Conservative Party. And another instance where CSIS alleges that India interfered in the Conservative leadership race. A representative from the committee that ran that race told CBC News last night the party did not get any reporting from the government about foreign interference. Conservative Party spokesperson Sarah Fisher said CSIS did not advise of any evidence about this. And this NSICOP report apparently is the first they've heard about it.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. In the U.S., a new border measure is expected to be signed into law today. It would restrict access to migrants seeking asylum from Mexico. U.S. President Joe Biden has been under pressure to toughen his stance on border security. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what do we know?
Yeah, this appears to be a major policy change from the White House and a political 180 for President Joe Biden. So later this morning, he's expected to sign an executive order that would temporarily shut down asylum seekers entering the southern border, using the same powers he once denounced that were used by his predecessor, former President Donald Trump. Now, under this plan, U.S. immigration officials can deport migrants without processing their asylum claims once illegal crossings exceed roughly 3,000 per day. Claims will then reopen when that number falls. Now, officials caution details are still being finalized, but a key Biden ally and Democratic Senator Chris Murphy admits the plan will almost certainly be challenged in court.
The president has such limited ability to issue executive orders that would have an impact on the border. He can't conjure resources out of thin air. If he were to try to shut down portions of the border, the courts would throw that out, I think, within a matter of weeks.
So officials say roughly 4,000 migrants are crossing illegally per day, which suggests this shutdown could take effect the moment the president signs the order.
Richard, how might this change things in the election?
Well, I think it suggests that Biden's campaign is hoping to neutralize the issue and say he's taking action, because this appears to be a recognition that Biden's handling of the border has become a major liability with voters, while being a rallying cry for his opponent, Donald Trump. Senate Republicans, you'll recall, blocked a similar deal, forcing the White House to go this route. So Biden's campaign is looking to show that they're taking action ahead of the first presidential debate, which happens about 3 weeks from now.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Opening statements will begin today in the federal case against Hunter Biden. He is the first child of a sitting U.S. president to face a criminal trial. Jury selection was completed yesterday in a Delaware court. Hunter Biden is facing 3 charges related to the purchase of a gun in 2018. Prosecutors allege he lied about his drug use during his application for the weapon. Hunter Biden has admitted that he struggled with addiction in the past. He has pleaded not guilty to the gun charges. Votes are being counted today in India's general election. Early results show the alliance led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi will win, but the margin is much smaller than expected. Modi is heading towards a third consecutive government, but the opposition Congress Party has also made gains. Our correspondent Chris Brown is tracking the results.
As Indians gather around TV sets to watch the election results, some commentators are having trouble containing themselves, as it appears Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP will fall far short of the landslide win his party had predicted. Indeed, Modi's coalition may even end up with fewer seats than it went in with. In Delhi, 79-year-old Viren Gupta voted for Modi, but he likes the outcome.
The good opposition for the India. That is very good opposition.
Chitigi Vajpayee is with the Chatham House think tank in London.
It's not great news for the BJP, but I think it is good news for India as a whole, as it reaffirms the country's democratic credentials.
Throughout Modi's 10 years of rule, he's been accused of inflaming religious divisions in India by advocating a Hindu nationalist agenda and calling Muslims infiltrators.
So I think we could see some attempts to try and curtail or pull back on some of the more divisive identity-driven politics if we see a weaker coalition government return to power.
It appears the India Alliance opposition, which includes a Congress party that ruled India for decades, made significant gains, even as some of its leaders campaigned from jail and its bank accounts were frozen. Modi is credited with spurring India's remarkable economic growth and enhanced clout on the world stage. And while his third straight mandate is historic, his opponents will also interpret these results that he's far from invincible. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Low water levels are threatening a seasonal transportation lifeline for a community in Northwest Territories. People living in Fort Simpson use a local ferry to cross the Liard River. But given the lack of water, the territorial government wants to dredge a section of the river. They say it may be the only way to keep the ferry moving. Kate Kyle reports.
The MV Lafferty chugs across the Liard River, delivering vehicles, passengers, and supplies. The 10-minute voyage is the only way to reach Fort Simpson this time of year, other than flying.
It's really our only connection.
Record low water levels on the Liard River worry Fort Simpson Mayor Sean Welly.
We're starting at a much lower level, so they're expecting that by fall time, there could be a much earlier shutdown.
The territorial government is proposing dredging a section of the Liard River in August, clearing 8,000 cubic meters of sediment and boulders near the ferry landings. Jacqueline Demers is a superintendent with the Department of Infrastructure.
We're hoping this work will help us to maintain operations late in the season, and will also protect damage to the vessel.
Water levels are slowly climbing from mountain snowmelt. Territorial hydrologist Ryan Connon says there's still good reason to be prepared.
In the absence of significant rain or significant precipitation, they could start decreasing early.
Mayor Sean Welly says dredging isn't enough.
But they need to be taking a look at forward steps towards a possible bridge across the Liard as well. Climate change is not going to get better.
The territorial government is planning a depth survey to better understand what's below the Liard River in case they have to dredge deeper. Kate Kyle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
This Thursday, June 6th, is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It was a turning point in the Second World War when Canadian, American, and British troops stormed the beaches of Normandy. CBC Radio will have special coverage commemorating the day. Host Nala Ayad and John Northcott will bring you highlights from the official ceremony on Juno Beach and interviews with living veterans who were on the beach 80 years ago. That is this Thursday on CBC Radio 1 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 Atlantic, 2:30 in Newfoundland. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
$17 degrees and raining. How quickly did that sky change in the last hour? Wow. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg, and you're on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. More on the weather and the sky in just a moment. This hour on the show, it is just like hockey, but some say a bit more fun. We're going to hear from two inline hockey players who believe more Manitobans should be trying the sport. They're heading to Spain to represent Canada at the Masters Inline Hockey World Cup. In addition, when it comes to support for encampments on university campuses, experts say there's a stark divide between Canada's and older and younger generations in terms of how they view the protest movements. That's coming up this hour on the program. And then at 10 to 8 this morning, a new intelligence report on foreign interference is out. We're going to talk to our parliamentary reporter, the parliamentary reporter for the National Post, who's on with us most Tuesdays, all about it. Ryan Tumulty will join us. Right now, let's get into Manitoba news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg Transit has made a safety feature available on all of its buses. Emergency video camera live streaming has been an option on 50 buses since 2021. Transit has now enabled the feature on all 607 transit buses. A single button turns on the video cameras, allowing transit supervisors to view live camera feeds of emergency situations. We'll hear more about that. Also, internal troubles at the Mountain View School Division in Dauphin have intensified after its superintendent was fired and 3 trustees quit days later. We'll hear what's going on coming up in our next news at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Abby Adeyemi, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine. Good morning.
Well, this morning I was driving to work, and as I was driving down Portage Avenue, looking looking east, sorry.
East.
I'm directionally challenged. Don't judge me. Can't find my car in a parking lot either. Anyway, looking east, I'm noticing the sky is pinky kind of red, and I thought to myself, I always had that thing in my head, red sky in the morning, sailors take warning.
Yeah, true.
Red sky at night, sailor's delight. And so we had a beautiful sunrise. I think we actually might have had a picture that you sent.
Yeah, I sent. You should be seeing that on our YouTube page right now.
This is the one that you sent actually that we're seeing right now. We're circling through. So these are morning pictures.
Yep.
Of the morning sky. This is across U of W. It's
across
almost purple.
U of W. Yeah, beautiful morning. I got distracted this morning on my way in. I'm like, I just have to pull over to take that. This one was at the bridge across Route 90 Abenoji making out. I had to stop there, like, you know what, I need to look east and just appreciate this beautiful sky before the rain comes.
It's like a sliver of pink and then that hot purple
and
above
then I got to walk. It was still there. I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to capture this as well.
And then remember the whole thing I was talking about, red sky in the morning is a warning? Well, now it's raining, but red sky at night's a delight. So let's see a night picture here. This is stunning. This is actually, we got a little glimmer of this to begin with. Let's bring up that big pink picture that came in from Brenda Keeper. This came in, look at this.
Wow.
Look at this image. This is Brenda Keeper writing to CBC. So this is, she said, I want to share some pictures of our beautiful evening sunsets in Little Grand Rapids. Wow. Isn't that amazing? We live in a beautiful place.
Just look east in the morning and look west at night, and you will enjoy it.
For the radio listeners here, I mean, the entire picture is pink. The glow of the sky on the water is just stunning. So thank you so much, Brenda, for sending in the photos. Remember, we're on YouTube, so we have a place to show you these while we're on the radio with you as well. The whole point also of our conversation here, Abby, is it's all gone now.
It's gone.
Everything's great.
Everything's
great.
That I captured before 4:30 this morning.
Man, it changed fast. So what's up for the day?
Well, right now it's 16 degrees in our city. Light rain we're already seeing in the downtown. This morning's rain will definitely be ending, leading to mostly cloudy skies. And then we have a 60% chance of showers later. This afternoon, we should be expecting a mix of sun and clouds with a risk of thunderstorm coming with that. And we should see about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain possible. Now, the winds will be shifting from the southeast to the southwest, and we will see a high of 21 today. And tonight, partly cloudy, some breezy conditions, still southwest winds continue. Once again in Winnipeg, it's 17 degrees. The rain has started in the downtown. We're expecting the rain to be with us for the early part of this morning, and then it's going to be ending and leaving us with a 60% chance of showers for the rest of the day.
All right, there's your weather. Let's get into our morning commute with Corey Funk.
If you're sailing to work this morning, you are going to want to take warning. I did see a red sky on the way in. Otherwise, it has been pretty quiet. We did get a call from Dan on a bike. He did say it's wet and warm out there. So it's kind of that catch-22 where you put on your rain gear and you're just kind of sweating otherwise. But if you see anything else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, if you do see any maybe large puddles people want to take a look at look out for under any underpasses, do let me know. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
I do want to mention just on your morning commute, take it easy if you're going through construction zones and watch for workers. So they do overnight work. I know it's raining pretty hard, so that also will be an issue. But I know that Portage at Arlington and Portage at Sherbourne on my way in, you have to sort of shimmy around. The lanes are it's down to sort of 2 lanes. You lose 1 lane. And there were already workers up early this morning in those zones, so take it easy. Well, a lot of us are watching hockey right now. A lot of eyes on the NHL playoffs, especially with the Oilers advancing to the Stanley Cup final. But a pair of Manitobans is looking forward to lacing up their skates of a different kind. Not ice skates, roller skates. Jeremy Torrey and Janet Horbadiuk are heading to Spain this week. They're representing Team Canada at the 2024 Masters Inline Hockey World Association Cup. Now, yesterday, they joined the CBC's Faith Fundal in studio to explain more about the sport.
Jeremy, let's start with you here, beginning with the sport. It looks very similar to ice hockey. What makes it different?
Well, there are a few things. Obviously, we don't play with roller skates, which are, side by side. We use actually inline. There are four wheels underneath, so it's a lot like a hockey skate, but we play on tiles mostly. There are some leagues around the country that actually play on polished concrete, and way back in the late 90s or early 90s when I first started playing it, that's what we played on.
And did it feel similar to playing on ice because it was polished and because it was slippery, essentially?
Yeah, the biggest thing that people wonder about is how do you stop? And you have to learn. You build up the confidence to be able to push out and put your weight and make that happen. But over years, you get used to it. And with the polished concrete, I found that the dustier it got, the easier it was because you could slide a little bit. Okay. But right now, we play with interlocking tiles. And that allows for a better experience, a better game.
Sounds like a fancier version of polished concrete.
It is, but it's... It makes the game a little bit better, right? And, Jared is the president of the Winnipeg Inline Association here, and they bought a floor and installed it and install it, take it out every season. And in fact, when we go over to Spain, we're playing with what are called still mat floors, and they're really great. I mean, the puck just goes. And, you play 4-on-4, no offside, no icing, no body checking. There is body contact, of course, but it's a much more open game. It's possession oriented. It's not just, like the NHL,
it's not about
right?
the fighting. It's really...
when you watch overtime in regular season, right, it's 3-on-3, and nobody's just going down and ripping a shot.
How did you get introduced to the sport?
I'm trying to remember. It would have been years ago. I think it was Michael Hunt, who's a pretty popular roller hockey guy here in Winnipeg. And I got hooked up with him and we started playing around the league. And it was great. I mean, back in the early 2000s, roller hockey was huge. And I don't know if a lot of listeners realize, but in 1999, it was in the Pan Am Games.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it was a really cool experience. Sold out Max Bell Arena, right? U of M campus. All countries from all over the world. And that was in its height of what roller hockey is now. So.
What about now? In terms of the community in Manitoba, what's it like? How would you characterize it?
So right now, we're the only league in town. So Winnipeg Inline Hockey League, WIHL. So winnipeginline.com is our website. Our season goes from April to the end of June. So we're just wrapping up right now. We'll start again in 2025. So we'd love to have as many kids out as we can. Canada ice rules. That's the reality. Ice hockey is king here. But if you go into the States, or more importantly, Europe, where we're heading, actually roller hockey rules. So it's a growing sport out there. A lot of people play in it. And a nice thing about it is it doesn't cost a lot of money to play because there's no ice, right? So.
And Jeremy, what's your sense of why it's such an underrated sport, particularly here in Canada?
Well, as Jared said, right, ice hockey's king. I mean, we've got kids who play in spring leagues and travel teams and everything else, and just the costs are crazy, but people want to pursue that. I mean,
yeah. I guess does it make sense to you why, I mean, you're both in it. Does it make sense to you why the other hockey is something that's more popular, or it seems to be more in people's minds when you think about playing hockey?
Well, we're both ice hockey guys.
Yeah.
And everybody who plays in our league is an ice hockey guy, right? A girl. And, but this is a nice little different taste. It's a different time of season. Ice hockey is kind of wrapping up when we start up. And once you get exposed to it, you kind of go, gee, I really like the sport. And you start looking around, you're going, geez, there's a tournament down in Los Angeles. I'm going to go to that tournament. And we send people down, and you can travel the world playing inline roller hockey. So, yeah.
You have, I think, 3 different teams from Canada for this tournament in Spain. A 37-plus team, a 45-plus team, and a 50-plus team. What's that like for either of you when you think about having that availability to do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's pretty awesome because we've grown up playing hockey, playing sports, whatever. Everyone is competitive to a certain degree, particularly when you're playing sports. So to have an outlet is really awesome. There's literally nothing like being able to put on the national jersey and represent your country.
It's a big
there's
deal.
literally only a handful of people every year in our country that get to do that, and it's quite a privilege, and it's pretty awesome. Even for example, this morning I got an email from the Canada Inline president where he invited my 17-year-old son to play for the World Junior team down in Colombia in August.
That's exciting.
Which is awesome. Where else is he going to get that opportunity? So it's a bit of a divergent path, but I think I'd even noted to your producer a little while ago that Connor Bedard was playing in Narch, which is a tournament in California in July that we've been going to for almost 10 years.
No kidding.
And we would have played against him, but we didn't know it.
Jared, what are you most looking forward to in this tournament?
I love the game against USA.
There's always a rivalry.
There's
Doesn't
always
matter
a
what
rivalry,
sport.
and we got a couple good buddies on that team, but we're not friends when we're on the floor. But it's those are the highlights for me for sure.
Jeremy Torrey and Jarrett Horbadiuk play inline hockey here in Winnipeg. They were talking there in conversation with CBC's Faith Fundal. They're both heading to Spain this week, as you heard, for the 2024 Masters Inline World Hockey Association World Cup. 6:23, and wow, it's humid. Hey, that's because it just started to rain. It is pouring out there in downtown Winnipeg. 17 degrees, wet and warm, said one of the callers, and that is correct. Big gray sky out there. Our high today in the city is going to be right around 21 degrees, and we do have a risk of a thunderstorm with us this morning. Well, it is graduation season, and some of the country's largest universities are going to be holding convocation ceremonies against the backdrop of campus encampments. Right next door to our studio, through the window here, I can see on Portage Avenue, an encampment's been set up on the University of Winnipeg's front lawn. It's been there for over 3 weeks. These are pro-Palestinian demonstrations, and they've sparked public debate over where and for how long it's acceptable to protest. The Angus Reid Institute has just released a new poll on Canadians' views on the issue, and joining us to talk about it is John Rowe, Research Associate with the Angus Reid Institute. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what did you find out? What can you tell us about the attitudes of Canadians when it comes to the campus encampments we've been seeing?
Well, we asked Canadians whether or not they would find it acceptable or unacceptable for these encampments to last various lengths of time, from overnight to several months. And what we found is that Canadians kind of lean towards finding each of these lengths unacceptable. So when it comes to an overnight encampment, 42% of Canadians say that's acceptable, and half say it's unacceptable. And it kind of, the acceptability declines from there. So only 25% of Canadians believe that an encampment lasting several months would be acceptable. So what we found is that kind of as these protest encampments have lasted, as you said there, at the University of Winnipeg for 3 weeks, I think the longest one in Canada now is over a month old. Canadians kind of feel like these protesters have worn out their welcome.
How did the age of the respondents affect the opinions of the people that filled out the survey?
Well, that appears to be a big factor. Younger Canadians who are more likely to be university aged, in kind of the 18 to 24-year-old crowd, they're more likely to say a protest of any length encampment, of any length is acceptable. So 2/3 of them feel one overnight is acceptable to them, and up to several months, even a majority still say that that's acceptable. Whereas older Canadians are more likely to find a protest encampment of any length unacceptable. So there is a huge divide in younger Canadians. I think are looking at this and they're seeing it's okay that these protest encampments have lasted this long. Older Canadians are much more likely to say they shouldn't have been there even overnight.
Do we have a sense at all of why that divide exists generationally?
Well, I think there's two factors at play. The first is that younger Canadians, from our previous polling, we found that they're more likely to have taken part in protests themselves and more likely to say that they find different protest tactics acceptable as well as different locations. So they have kind of a broader acceptability of where people can protest and the different tactics. So even things other people would maybe call disruptive, they'd say that's okay if they're trying to get protesters are trying to get their message across.
Can you give us an example, just if I interject there? What do you mean? Other things that people might find disruptive?
So things like blocking like downtown streets or obstructing ports or border crossings, like those kind of ways of getting your message across. Younger Canadians are more likely to say, yeah, that's an acceptable means of protest just for protesters to kind of make their voice heard. Older Canadians are more likely to oppose those kind of more disruptive tactics and more likely to say, yeah, you shouldn't be protesting in front of people's homes or politicians' homes, like those kind of different locations. I think the other factor at play specifically in this case is younger Canadians on our previous polling that we've done on this conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza are more likely to say that their sympathies lie with the Palestinians in this conflict. Older Canadians are more likely to say that their sympathies lie with the Israelis. So with that divide, I think younger Canadians are looking at these protesters and they're saying, I agree with this message. I kind of support them. So they're more likely to find their tactics acceptable.
We actually had a very interesting discussion about this, a couple of years ago, actually, when some protesters were on the median in front of the then Premier's home, Brian Pallister on Wellington Crescent, and it sparked a whole conversation in community about protest. And actually, where you could protest became a point of discussion at the legislature in a bill as well. So it's very much on topic to sort of understand people's attitudes. I understand you also looked at how our attitudes in Canada compare to Americans. What did you find there?
Well, Americans have been kind of dealing with these campus encampments for a few weeks longer than Canadians. They started on American universities and then kind of spread north of the border. But what we found is that opinions kind of align almost exactly. So when Americans, 41% of Americans say that an overnight encampment is acceptable to them, 42% of Canadians say that's acceptable to them. And we're seeing that similar generational divide. So younger Americans are more likely to find any length of encampment acceptable. Older Americans are more likely to say, yeah, even an overnight encampment is unacceptable. So it's interesting how closely opinions aligned across the border on this.
And across the border, did you look at how political beliefs affect opinions about campus encampments as well?
Yeah, so people who say they would vote Joe Biden in the upcoming presidential election, they're much more likely to say that an encampment of any length is acceptable to them. People who say that they would support Donald Trump, they're more likely to find any length of encampment unacceptable. And we do kind of see a similar left-right divide north of the border as well in Canada. So people who say they would vote NDP, even at a majority level, say that they would support an encampment lasting several months. People who vote Conservative, they find any length of encampment unacceptable to them. And people who say that they would vote Liberal are kind of in between. So we do see that political divide on both sides of the border.
And to be clear, your question was worded about encampments on university campuses. So not
Correct,
protest anywhere, sites of protest anywhere. Just last, before we turned our attention to the news this morning, John, what are you hoping Canadians take away from what you've looked at here from your research?
Well, this kind of expands on some previous research we had done in recent months, kind of about this protests in general and whether or not people find different locations acceptable and different tactics. So I think what we're finding is that though Canadians are very likely to say that they support the right to protest, that protest is a very fundamental part of democracy, there's also quite a few Canadians that say, yeah, okay, here's where you can protest and here's where I find it acceptable and here's where I don't want you protesting. So I think it's interesting to kind of learn where those boundaries are for Canadians and kind of which tactics people find acceptable and not.
Thank you very much for walking through your research with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Marcy.
That's John Rowe. He's a research associate at the Angus Reid Institute. Business news coming up. We're going to hear why airfare could be going up. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, we're waking up wet in Winnipeg. Rain, though, ending later this morning. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon and a high of 21. Winnipeg Transit has enabled video live streaming on all buses as an emergency feature. Since 2021, drivers on 50 transit buses have been able to hit a button, allowing transit supervisors to view live camera feeds of emergency situations. Well, Transit has now enabled this feature on all 607 buses. Janice Lukes, the councillor responsible for Transit, says live streaming can make it easier for Transit to deploy police, paramedics, or supervisors.
There's issues on the transit buses from time to time on certain routes. And what this does is it allows Transit's control center to also see what's going on and ensure the proper emergency services are dispatched.
The city's transit union says video streaming on buses is fine if it's used for emergencies and not to spy on bus drivers. An expert who assessed Jeremy Skibitsky's mental state is expected to testify today about those assessments. Dr. Sohom Das is a forensic psychiatrist, an author and YouTuber from the UK. He has interviewed Skibitsky twice since he was arrested in 2022. The Winnipeg man has admitted in a police video to killing 4 women, but his lawyers argue he's not criminally responsible because of a mental disorder. Lawyers spent yesterday discussing whether Das could provide expert testimony. Prosecutors questioned him on some of his YouTube videos, including one where he advised people not to confess if they killed someone. In another video, which has since been removed, he outlined ways to fake having a mental illness. Das says some of his videos are satire and not to be taken seriously. Chief Justice Glenn Joyal says the videos do raise potential questions about Das's professionalism and credibility, but do not disqualify him from testifying. Manitoba politicians sat past midnight as more than 20 bills went to a final vote before the legislature began its summer break. Among the bills passed is one ending the province's ban on homegrown recreational cannabis. A major portion of the government's agenda, though, is going to carry over to fall. An omnibus bill to enact the NDP government's budget measures is not going to a final vote until after the Ledge reconvenes in October. The Liberal government's pharmacare bill in Ottawa is headed to the Senate after passing in the House of Commons last night. The plan is to start offering diabetes drugs and contraceptives and eventually offer more medication. Kevin Lamoureux is a Manitoba Liberal MP.
If you have diabetes in Canada, you can anticipate medications at no cost, whether you live in Halifax, Montreal, Quebec City, Winnipeg, Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver. That is the idea of having a national program.
The National Pharmacare Plan was part of the supply and confidence deal between the Liberals and NDP to keep the minority government alive. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. 3 trustees at a Southwest Manitoba school division have quit just days after the superintendent was fired. Stephen Jaddock was terminated as superintendent at Mountain View School Division following a special board meeting on Friday. Leafa Misko says she and 2 other trustees notified the board of their resignations yesterday.
Not all voices have been appreciated, respected, or welcomed at that board table. It came to a time where it was no longer effective to remain sitting at the board table.
Board Chair Gabe Mercier says Jaddock was removed as superintendent because he'd proposed a change to his salary. And he says the 3 trustee resignations are the result of, quote, a power struggle between them and newer trustees. 1 in every 5 positions in the Thompson RCMP detachment is unstaffed, including 2 leadership positions and 7 officers. Colleen Smook is mayor of Manitoba's largest northern city. She says Thompson has one of the largest RCMP contingents per capita because of the unique landscape of the north.
We're only a community of 13,000, but we're a service area for approximately 65,000. So when you have a lot of transient population in that, in using our services in town, there's a lot more demand for the RCMP services.
In an email statement to CBC, an RCMP spokesperson says vacancy rates are only a snapshot in time, and with transfers, promotions, retirements, and new recruits, the numbers change frequently. Feeding bears on the highway does not help the animal. It hurts them. It's a message conservation officers are trying to get across in northern Manitoba. It comes as a mother bear and cub have been spotted on Highway 391 north of Thompson. The furry family's been reported to be too friendly with people who are giving them food. Grant White is Staff Sergeant at Manitoba Conservation.
If people want to help the bears, and everybody wants to help wildlife, there's better ways of doing it. You could keep our forests clean, keep things cleaned up along the roads, places like that. And if they want to help, they're better off to donate some money to different user groups out there.
White says if people stop feeding the bears now, they will eventually move on and become self-sufficient in the forest. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather Wells.
Yes.
I know you're in the news center this morning. You should see, I have the windows open here. The blinds open here so I can see out the window. People are soaked outside.
Oh, my goodness.
With the rain. Abby actually ducked out. Do you have some of the sound of the rain? I think you actually stuck your phone out there. Listen. I know it just sounds like a shh.
It's torrential though, right? Like a waterfall.
Yeah, it's really, really, really wet. So there's a little bit of video up too if you're watching our YouTube channel. It's coming down out there, Abby, hey? What's the rest of the forecast saying?
Yeah, look. For those watching on YouTube, that's what it looks like outside.
And it's really,
it's amassing. Right now, we're seeing that rain, 17 degrees in Winnipeg. We should expect it to end this morning, and then the rest of the day will be in a cloudy condition and a 60% chance of showers again coming. But we will also have a mix of sun and clouds sometime in the afternoon, and there's a risk of thunderstorm late this morning into the afternoon with a rainfall up to about 10 millimeters. And the winds is something you should take into consideration also, as it's going to be shifting from the southeast to the southwest, and we will touch a high of 21. Heading west to Brandon, it is currently 14 degrees. We're also seeing rain in that part of the province. The showers would end late this morning. Then we expect a mix of sun and clouds with up to 10 millimeters of rain. It will be breezy at some points, and you'll see a high of 19. Moving north to Thompson, where it is 8 degrees and cloudy, mainly cloudy day with a 60% chance of rain later in the afternoon, a high of 13. Further north in Churchill, it is 0. We have mist there at the moment. Expect cloudy skies later with a chance of showers this morning. Fog at times and breezy conditions will come with that. We'll touch a high of +3. Now, down in Dauphin, where it's 13 degrees, it's raining at that point. It's raining at the moment. Showers will be ending this morning, and then we'll see cloudy skies, and then it will be breezy, a high of 20. Gimli is currently at 15 with rain showers also. The Interlake region today will see rain ending late this morning, and then cloudy with a 60% chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorm in the afternoon. Up to 15 millimeters expected, and we'll get to a high of 22. Steinbach and Morris both at 16 degrees with rain also coming down. This is going to be ending this morning, and for the Pembina Valley region, the rain will see a risk of thunderstorm, breezy conditions, and for both Steinbach and Morris, we'll be touching a high of 21. Once again in Winnipeg, it is 17 degrees. The rain coming down, expected to end sometime this morning, and we'll get to a high of 21.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey, you can see me cranking my head around, looking out the window at all this rain. People are just soaked. I have this weird thing I do all the time too when it rains. Do you know we have the wipers on the vehicles? You just see them stopped at Spence and Portage.
Yeah.
I always sort of I imagine they're all going in sync.
Oh,
like there's
like
some
dancing?
kind of a rain dancing air band.
Yeah, kind of like a vaudeville.
But they never
kinda.
are. They're always like, I don't know why my head does that. But you will need wipers on high for sure out there.
I always forget to turn on my wipers, and it's always my wife who's driving. If I'm driving, she just turns over, flips them on.
How do you forget?
I don't know. I just forget. I don't know. It's a weird thing. I think actually we've been driving together. I think you flipped them on
I
for me
have flipped
once
them
or
on.
Yes,
Yeah, I didn't
don't
know it was a regular thing.
I just
though.
don't notice. I don't know.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm obsessed with my wipers.
Yeah.
I'm like low, high, looking at the drops, trying to figure out just that right thing. I have this thing about if it's going too fast, and then I'm like, oh no, I don't need to go that fast. I've got this thing about getting just the right speed.
If it goes too fast, I get a little anxious. It seems like a bit much.
Why do we think so much about these things?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, the drive otherwise, how's it going?
Otherwise pretty wet so far. Yeah, you'll definitely gonna want a rain suit on if you're heading out out on your bike. But other than that, if you see something else going on out there, look out for hydroplaning, of course, especially under underpasses and things like that. Give me a call. Let me know what you're seeing out there. 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Crystalie Ramlakan joins us now via Zoom. Hi, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So you're thinking about the rain, I heard too?
Yes, I do the exact same thing as you, because if it goes too fast, then there's that like squeaking sound on your windshield, right?
Yes.
And I think I think maybe it damages your wiper blades. I don't know, possibly.
I'm not
sure.
It's also just the sound of it for me is like nails on a chalkboard or something. I'm not sure why.
Totally, yes. And then I have a thing in my car where you like twist it, but then there's also like different levels of where you twist it.
Mm-hmm.
I always think that there's like some magical thing that I don't know about my car that is like timing the blades to go at different times.
We all have a
different
relationship.
speeds.
We actually, I think every driver listening is probably like, yeah, me too. Like I think you have a relationship with what you do when it rains and how you work the wipers, right? Everyone's got a rhythm. All right, let's go from the car to the sky in business news. Why could the cost of airfares be going up?
Well, that is the word from the industry trade group, the International Air Transport Association, which held its annual meeting in Dubai yesterday. So as airlines recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, industry leaders say there are several costs likely to push ticket prices higher, including inflation and high jet fuel costs, which are about a third of airline expenses. Now, a global push for the aviation industry to decarbonize has more carriers fighting for the little amount of so-called sustainable aviation fuel available in the market. So that's driving prices up. And the trade group says carriers are also trying to keep costs in control, but it's unrealistic to expect companies to absorb all the costs. Also pressuring the industry is a pandemic hangover in aircraft production. So carriers now keep older planes that burn more fuel flying longer. And, there just aren't enough aircraft to expand routes and then, increase supply to try to bring down overall prices.
Let's go to another story. The Bank of Canada, as you likely know, listeners, is going to make its next interest rate decision tomorrow. What could be the impact of a cut, Crystalie?
Yeah, you're right. So banks are kind of split on whether this is actually going to happen tomorrow. But if it does, some experts say it could prompt a rebound in consumer spending. So across the latest set of quarterly earnings calls, nearly every major company spanning Canada's retail landscape said they've noticed shoppers increasingly looking for deals and thinking twice about some purchases. And many say a mix of inflation and higher interest rates are to blame. But many agree the last half of this year could see some of those concerns ease, especially if the Bank of Canada begins cutting its key lending rate over the summer. A rate could also give Canada's slow housing market a jolt if prospective buyers gain confidence that borrowing costs are on the decline. So many buyers have been delaying their house hunting in anticipation of an interest rate cut, which will also, of course, have implications on car loans and lines of credit. But any mortgage payment relief will be relatively small at first, as the central bank is expected to cut rates slowly. They don't want to drive inflation back up. That's the whole reason why they started putting the interest rates up, was try to slow down the economy. And, this is going to leave many would-be buyers priced out of the market still.
And finally here this morning, meme stocks are shaking Wall Street once again, right?
Yeah, so over the weekend, Keith Gill, aka Roaring Kitty, a central character in the original 2021 meme stock mania, posted on Reddit about a sizable stake in GameStop. So the screenshot looked just like the ones that the account had shared in 2021, and it was the first post for the Reddit account since April of 2021. Now, when the stock market opened yesterday for trading, GameStop immediately soared, and so did AMC Entertainment, another popular meme stock. And so a meme stock is a stock that gains popularity among retail investors through social media. Now, ever since smaller investors started boosting stock prices of downtrodden companies, the potential for more flare-ups has been obvious. Experts say this time Wall Street is better prepared to more easily digest these sharp movements. But some things remain the same. Mainly the risk with such volatile stocks where prices can soar and then drop down quickly. Barry Schwartz is with Baskin Wealth Management. This is his take on it.
If you think you are smarter than companies that are running hundreds of billions of dollars that have special algorithms to take advantage of stock movements. If you think you can get out before they can, good luck to you. You're going to get burned. And so retail traders, anybody that is paying attention to this shouldn't. And, if you want to go have fun, take $5 and go buy a lottery ticket. You got a better chance of making money there than you do at playing these meme stocks.
And of course, that would be the take for someone who works for a big investment firm. 3 weeks ago, GameStop shares were also soaring on excitement from a post on social media by another account tied to Gil. An X, formerly known as Twitter account associated with him, made its first post since June of 2021, but the gains fizzled relatively quickly after that.
What's up in the markets today?
In Europe, markets are lower. Germany, the UK, and France are all down. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is down, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is up. Oil is down $1.67 to $72.55 US per barrel. Gold is down $18.45 to $2,332.30 US per ounce. And the dollar is down about 1/3 of a cent to 73 cents US.
All right, thanks very much, Crystal Lee.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Via Zoom, that's Crystal Lee Ramlican. She joins us every morning with business news. It is 6:47 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. Well, let's turn our attention back to something that was developing yesterday. Hundreds of people witnessed a public apology from the University of Manitoba to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The university says it's sorry for the harm caused by accepting and storing Indigenous remains and artifacts. Graduate student Savannah Moon spoke at the event. She based her thesis on the rematriation and repatriation of Indigenous elders.
Hi, everyone. Nipi Mikanak Esqueo Natisnakasin, Mikanak Nadodam. My name is Savannah Moon. My family roots are in St. Peter's, Peguis, and Winnipeg, Manitoba. I am truly honored and humbled to be here before you, and I am so grateful to everyone who has made this day a reality. Thank you to our Elders Council, our Working Circle, our Anthropology Repatriation Committee. I'm a master's student here at the University of Manitoba, and my thesis has been based on the rematriation and repatriation of Indigenous ancestors held here. This path for me was not born from nothing, and looking back on the past 10 years since I first became a student, I understand why I am standing here today. When I first became a student in 2013 at just 18 years old, one of the very first things I heard from other students when I got on campus was something to the effect of, "Did you hear they got Indian bones in here?" Nobody whispered about this shocking truth. It was an open secret. It was something that our own professors acknowledged in our classrooms, but said that there was nothing they could do. I say these troubling things out loud so that you know that it happened and that you can bear witness to what an Indigenous student first learned from a university institution when she walked through these doors. It was that these violences are happening right now in our generation, and that policies in heritage-holding institutions were interested in making sure that these violences stayed alive for the next generations. People involved in heritage-holding and educational institutions have been afraid and hesitant to broach this topic, and they have been worried that this may make things explosive and divisive. Harms and violences could be acknowledged but never addressed. Through our past inaction, we teach our students, who go on to become our next professors, our administrators, our curators, our researchers, our laboratory supervisors, our department heads, our policymakers, to continue believing that this was not something that would be possible in our lifetimes, that having our ancestors stored in cardboard boxes was not only considered acceptable and professional conduct, but that heritage-holding institutions were built on denying basic humanity and dignity. That's what I thought 10 years ago, but that's not what I see before me today. Our ancestors are now in handmade cedar boxes, lovingly placed in a resting room, covered with colored fabrics, adorned by paintings, smelling of sacred medicines, waiting to be returned to their communities and descendants. Today marks a recognition that has taught everyone that change is possible. Our fears for the future only become true if we do not try. You must not be afraid to start these conversations. You must not be afraid to change your policies. You must not hesitate to do better by, with, and for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. You must not be afraid to do better for your students and by our mother, the earth, Turtle Island, our homeland that we call Canada. To see now that my community, professors, fellow colleagues and students, and now my university have challenged an old vision of the future, and that we have done it hand in hand with our elders and descendant communities, it tells me that we don't have to be afraid anymore. When we have brave spaces with courageous conversations and allow the truth to come out, we can work together towards a reconciled future. Because of the courage, perseverance, and dedication of many Indigenous and non-Indigenous people and allies, we can bring our ancestors home. Ekosani, miigwech.
Beautiful remarks, eh? Those were yesterday. That was yesterday. Graduate student Savannah Moon speaking at the University of Manitoba. Coming up at 10 to 8 this morning in the next hour, we're going to talk to a historian about this. Right now, 9 minutes to 7 a.m., 17 in Winnipeg with rain, light rain in Brandon, 14, cloudy in Thompson, and 8 degrees. And the kind of rain where you're going to need an umbrella and a jacket. It's coming down out there. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on CBC. Well, as you may have heard in our local news, Manitoba politicians were up late last night, past midnight. More than 20 bills went to a final vote before the legislature begins its summer break. So we're going to hear more about the content of those bills in the news this morning. But next on the show, let's turn to federal politics. Yesterday afternoon, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians tabled a report. The committee, also known as NSICOP, is made up of MPs and senators from all across the political spectrum. They were asked by the Prime Minister last year to investigate allegation of interference by China. Their report makes a number of recommendations as well as a number of allegations. To talk about it, Ryan Tumulty's here, parliamentary reporter with the National Post. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's get right into the contents of the recommendations here, Ryan, if we may. What did it recommend?
Yeah, so, it was quite a shocking report, but it recommended some big changes basically to how candidates are nominated. That was one of the big changes that it thought was important. So right now, nomination contests are run by parties themselves. Some of them have fairly loose rules. The Liberal Party, for example, you don't need to be a citizen to vote in a nomination. You can be 16 and vote in a nomination. Both of those things were concerned. The broader issue of nominations was a concern for the committee, and it says it's something really all parties have to clamp down to, because it says this is sort of the front door of how foreign powers are interfering in our nomination contests. So that was a big issue. It also called for a common definition of foreign interference across government. And to give you an example of that in practice, last year, Foreign Affairs expelled a Chinese diplomat. They made that decision after it was clear that he had been part of foreign interference efforts. CSIS, our spy agency, had been raising red flags and calling for his expulsion for years. But they didn't share the same view of what was going on. And so the Foreign Affairs Department didn't act until last year.
So far, what response have we seen from the government?
Yeah, I would say from the government, we have seen a response where they talk about the bill they already have in front of the House of Commons. So this is C-70. It's actually moving quite quickly through the House of Commons. It brings in a foreign agent registry. It makes some other changes that I think are pretty significant, updates CSIS powers, that sort of thing. They see that as their way in, as their way to address this problem. Certainly, the committee said that bill is a good step forward, but it doesn't address all of these issues. And, they said there's really a lot more work to be done here. The government also did, disagree with the committee, which is kind of unusual. Generally, they just sort of accept these reports, but they said in some cases they think the committee is taking one piece of intelligence, which, may not show the whole picture, and drawing some broader conclusions.
I want to switch gears here and save us some time to talk about the carbon tax. because
Sure.
the parliamentary budget officer has admitted there were mistakes in the calculation around the consumer costs of the tax. So can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so the parliamentary budget officer's done a bunch of reports on the carbon tax, and he generally comes to the conclusion that when you talk about the way the Liberals talk about the carbon tax, the direct, tax you pay versus the rebates you get, what the Liberals say is accurate, that most people get more back in rebates than they pay directly in taxes. But his argument is that those carbon taxes get passed on to consumers in indirect ways. So, when you buy food from the grocery store, part of what you're paying for is the carbon tax that the trucker who brought it to the grocery store had to pay, that sort of thing. So he says when you add in that, Canadians are usually worse off. But interestingly, what he admitted sort of quietly, he just posted a small correction on his website without drawing bigger attention to it until recently. But what he said is that his calculations included not just the consumer carbon tax, the one we're all used to, but the industrial levy, which is something that's fined on heavy emitters, so power plants, refineries, oil sands mines, as an example. He said that shouldn't have been part of his calculation, and it was. He says his overall impression of the carbon tax doesn't change, but he hasn't provided new numbers of the financial impacts yet.
Thank you very much for this, Ryan. Appreciate having you on.
All right, thank you.
That's Ryan Tumulty, parliamentary reporter with the National Post. Remember, anything you hear on the program looking at national politics can also be found online at cbc.ca, and some more analysis coming up on World Report as well at 7 o'clock. Right now, it is exactly 3 minutes to 7 a.m. on a wet and rainy Tuesday morning. Full details on that forecast after Heather Wells and our news headlines this morning. Hi there.
Hi, good morning. Well, Manitoba politicians might be feeling a little bleary-eyed this morning. They burned the midnight oil sitting past midnight as more than 20 bills went for a final vote before the legislature begins its summer break. Among the bills passed is the one that ends the province's ban on homegrown recreational cannabis. A bigger bill did not pass yet. We'll have to wait for fall, and that's the one that is an omnibus bill to enact the government's budget measures. So we'll hear more about that. And a fed bear is a dead bear. That is the message Manitoba Conservation is trying to get across as a mother and cubs are becoming regulars along a highway north of Thompson. We'll hear what's been going on and what you need to know coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
There's so many bear videos right now out there, Heather Wells. There was this huge bear out in Wasagamings. People were, taking video of on their back deck yesterday, and I just stopped moving on socials. So
yeah, well, and now that people are out more, going back to their cottages and things, they are taking food with them, and of course the bears know that, I guess,
and they need food too.
Yes,
we're in their territory. All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
So we'll listen for the proper advice, of course, about how to live alongside wildlife. It is at 17, raining in Winnipeg, a high today of 21. We're expecting 5 to 10 millimeters, so hopefully you got your jacket and your umbrella and all of the things. 788-3093 if you need us in traffic. Please call us at CBC. In the next hour of the show, Mexico's first woman president was declared Sunday night. Her victory represents a major step forward for Mexico. We're going to hear from a Mexican woman living here in Winnipeg. She has been watching the election closely, so we'll get more reaction from her. Also, speaking of women, today is Women's Golf Day, so we spoke to a local women's league to talk to them about women's golf and whether or not it's having a moment right now. We're going to take you out to Kildonan Park Golf Course in the next hour of the show. And at 10 to 8, as I alluded to this half hour, the University of Manitoba has announced the return of Indigenous artifacts and remains to communities where they come from. I alluded to the fact that we have a historian who's going to join us. They are a historian who's in the process of getting their own community's items back. So we're going to hear their story coming up in the next hour of Information Radio. You're with CBC 89.3. Stay with us.
On the Current.
There are many fat people who are healthy. There are many thin people who unfortunately are unhealthy.
This season we have been looking at wellness, what works, what doesn't, and what's a waste of money. Today, a whole program devoted to wellness, body and mind, with takeaways for your daily life. That's coming up on a special edition of The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland. and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Early election results in India suggest Prime Minister Narendra Modi's lead over the opposition will not be as large as expected. Votes in the world's largest election are still being counted. The Hindu nationalist will likely win a third consecutive term as head of India's governing alliance. Our correspondent Chris Brown is following the results.
From the moment the results in India's election began broadcasting around the country, it appeared there would be no landslide, no unassailable two-thirds majority for Narendra Modi. He will remain India's prime minister for a historic third term, but some BJP supporters in Delhi say they were hoping for more.
This is really unexpected from the Indian alliance, but yeah, they are doing good.
The India alliance, made up of the Congress Party and other opposition groups, attacked Modi's economic record, claiming too few people are benefiting from the country's soaring economy. Over the past decade, Modi also polarized India, and he was criticized at home and abroad for his record on minorities, especially Muslims. Chiriji Bajpai of London's Chatham House think tank says that may have fueled the opposition's resurgence.
This attempt to reframe India as a Hindu Rashtra or a Hindu nation has had an impact on India's identity. But at the same time, I think it's important to note that India's democracy is far more robust than is generally perceived.
India's stock market, which went bullish after exit polls suggested a Modi blowout, fell back sharply as the actual results trickled in. It appears the pro-business reforms many investors had counted on will now face a tougher challenge in an Indian parliament with a more robust opposition. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Security has been beefed up in Hong Kong for the 35th anniversary of the massacre in Tiananmen Square. Several activists have already been detained near Victoria Park. The downtown Hong Kong park is often the scene of vigils commemorating June 4th, 1989. That day, China's military moved into Tiananmen Square to end pro-democracy demonstrations. Ever since, protesters have taken to the streets in Beijing and Hong Kong to honor those who were killed. Hong Kong leader John Lee says the government will take action to maintain public order.
The threat to national security is real, and different people may use different excuses to hide their intention. So it is important we all bear that in mind, to be on guard all the time.
The Communist Party in China reported about 200 people died in the demonstration. Western observers and governments say thousands of protesters were killed that day. Demonstrators today are still pushing their demands for a free press and freedom of speech in China. Farmers from multiple European countries are rolling into Brussels. They are lining up their tractors in a park with a message for politicians. They say European climate rules are endangering their livelihoods, but environmentalists say these protests are really about politics and the influence of hard-right populists. The CBC's international climate correspondent Susan Ormiston is in Brussels with the latest.
We're standing in a large park near central Brussels, surrounded by hundreds of farm tractors and farmers from the Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, and others. They say that unfair legislation from the EU and their national governments is targeting farmers. They're trying to cut back nitrogen emissions in Europe, including from livestock manure. It's a large polluter in the Netherlands. We spoke to Jos Jubels, a cattle farmer and a vice president of the Farmers Defence Force.
Our European government decided that we have to cut down animal manure on our fields with like 40%, and we have to buy more fertilizer. So where's the logic in that? This leftist, idealistic way of thinking pushed by NGOs.
The Dutch are good farmers. They're proving to be some effective politicians too, encouraging people to slow down the EU's Green Deal by electing parties on the far right. Polls suggest those parties will make significant gains in Europe's parliamentary elections beginning later this week. Europe's Green Party is calling this protest mainly a far-right event that is trying to disguise itself as a farmers' protest. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Brussels.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin traveled to Cambodia today. He's pushing for stronger military ties with China's closest ally in Southeast Asia. Austin met with his Cambodian counterpart and Prime Minister Hun Manet on his one-day visit to Phnom Penh. The Defense Ministry says Austin's visit would strengthen the good cooperation between the countries. U.S. relations with Cambodia have been frosty for years, in part due to Phnom Penh's close ties with China. Washington also has been vocal about Cambodia's poor human rights record. The heat is rising in the southwestern United States. The U.S. National Weather Service says people from Las Vegas to Phoenix will experience the hottest temperatures since last September. And starting this week, they could get record daily highs. Cecile Juliette with CAL FIRE says crews are on high alert.
If people are looking for a sign that it's time to get prepared for peak fire activity, this is the sign.
Temperatures are already hovering close to 40 degrees Celsius, and in Las Vegas tomorrow, it could be as hot as 43.8 degrees. Canada's Chief Justice says Canadians have a role to play in stopping the spread of disinformation. Richard Wagner says the judicial system is witnessing attacks on its institutions and its judges. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, he is calling on Canadians to protect their courts from the harmful rhetoric being used in the United States.
It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change.
Canada's Chief Justice didn't mention Donald Trump by name, but Richard Wagner did call out a troubling trend he's seeing when a judge is scrutinized more than a judgment itself.
We should be especially concerned when elected representatives say these things.
Wagner says the top court is not immune from attack. In fact, the Supreme Court of Canada recently became the target of what he says are viral, inaccurate news stories, claiming one of its decisions found the word woman confusing.
We should make sure not to undermine our institution, not undermine the justice system, the courts, the judges.
If this is something being raised by the Chief Justice, I think we have to give it serious consideration.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says Canadians should take Wagner's warning seriously.
I'm not seeing that.
But conservative justice critic Rob Moore says Canadians should feel free to voice their opinions on judicial decisions, as long as they're accurate.
The decisions of the court have a major impact on all Canadians, and Canadians are rightly going to weigh in.
Wagner says Canada's democracy is strong, but it will only stay that way as long as Canadians defend it. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
This week in France, members of Papikas's Cree Nation will be honored for their contribution to the Second World War. They were among the Allied forces who stormed the beaches of Normandy 80 years ago, and their children and grandchildren will see a statue unveiled in their honor. Jason Warwick has more.
Our spirits will be there with the spirits of those gone on in a powerful way, with Creator looking upon us and blessing us.
Alan Bird's late father, Charles, was one of 6 members who landed on D-Day with the Regina Rifles. He was later wounded in the foot, leg, and shoulder, treated, and sent back to the front line. Other Papikassis members were also wounded after they were dropped in as paratroopers, their advance work critical to the Allied invasion plan. Papikassis Chief Frank Dieter says First Nations people were exempt from serving in the Second World War, but they volunteered anyway, at higher rates than non-Indigenous Canadians.
I have mixed emotions right now. They didn't have to go, but they went, right?
Dieter says Canada turned its back on them when they returned, denying them farmland and other compensation given to non-Indigenous veterans.
They thought they were fighting for a better life, but they just came back to the same life, right? So a little mixed emotions at the moment. But I'm very honored that they went, because we're a nation of warriors.
Before the statue is unveiled this week, the Papikassis delegation plans to stand on the beach and conduct a quiet spiritual ceremony. They say they'll remember their warriors and continue their fight for justice. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Regina.
And you can listen to a CBC radio special this Thursday commemorating D-Day. Hosts Nala Ayad and John Northcott will bring you highlights from the official ceremony on Juno Beach. That's on CBC Radio 1, 1 p.m. local time. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. It is raining out there. It's lightened up a little bit in the downtown through our studio window. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Thanks so much for being with us on your Tuesday morning. This hour on the program, Mexico has its first woman president. Claudia Sheinbaum won by a landslide. We're going to talk to a woman from our local Mexican community about the significance of having a woman president and also some of the hope that she brings as we analyze what the significance historically is of this win. Also, speaking of women, today is actually Women's Golf Day, and we're going to take you out to Kelowna Park Golf Course. There's a healthy rivalry that happens a couple evenings a week there, but women's golf sport-wise is really having a moment right now. And if you follow it, hello, Nelly Corda, 5 in a row. So stay tuned for that discussion. And at 10 to 8, we're going to build on a story that started developing yesterday. The University of Manitoba announcing the return of Indigenous artifacts and remains. We're going to talk to a historian who's in the process of getting her community's items back. So more on repatriation and rematriation. So stay tuned. That's just before 8. Right now, Heather Wells is in with our news headlines. Good morning again, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg Transit has made a safety feature available on all of its buses. Emergency video camera live streaming has been an option on 50 buses since 2021, but Transit has now enabled that feature on all 607 buses. A single button turns on video cameras, allowing transit supervisors to view live camera feeds of emergency situations. We'll hear more about how it works and what the transit union thinks about it. And as well, internal troubles at the Mountain View School Division in Dauphin are intensifying after its superintendent was fired and 3 trustees quit days later. The board's chair says it was a power struggle between the old guard and some of the new kids on the block. He says the trustees who quit were the old guard. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
Heather Wells.
Yes.
You ready to be really envious of what's going on over here in the studio? I know you're in the news center.
You know what? I think I saw a box of pastries being carried in.
Can we look at this on YouTube, please? Look at these beauties. My next guest is not here for the pastries. She's actually here to talk about the election of Mexico's first woman president. But Brenda Hernandez, can we please just talk about these? What are these?
Those one are like one of them are the most traditional things in Merida. Is one of the states that we have in Mexico. It's just puff pastry, cream cheese, and sugar. That's all.
Look at you waving it off. It's just this. They're beautiful. They're beautiful. How many of these do you make a day at your bakery over on Princess in Winnipeg?
It's a pen. Like sometimes like we are busy, sometimes like not.
Dozens and dozens, I bet. Thank you very much. You want one?
No.
I'll have one after our interview. How lovely. The studio smells divine, I gotta say. Thank you for bringing him in. To our discussion about politics in a moment. Right now, though, we better dip into weather and traffic. Abby Adeyemi on the other side of the glass. Don't worry, we'll deliver one of these for you, Abby, I promise.
Okay. I was like no longer focusing, but I'll try to focus at this point.
Raining out there. And look at it, kind of is coming in waves. Yeah. I just said it calmed down, and now it's back again to heavy rain.
Nope. It's still coming. We're experiencing rain in the city, 16 degrees at the moment in Winnipeg for today. This rain we're actually seeing is expected to end sometime this morning, and after that we will have cloudy skies with a forecast of 60% of chance of rain again throughout the day. Now, as we head into the afternoon period, we should be looking forward to a mix of sun and clouds making appearance. There's also a risk of thunderstorm in the forecast late this morning into the afternoon period, and then we'll be seeing about 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall possible in a total. It will be breezy with winds shifting from the southeast to the southwest as the day progresses, and we will touch a high of 21. Now, a sneak peek into tonight as we move into the evening, the skies will become partly cloudy. It will be breezy tonight with the southeast winds continuing, and temperatures will be deep into 14. In Winnipeg, it's 17 degrees. 16 rather. We're expecting rain this morning, and then later we're already seeing the rain this morning, and then we'll be seeing a mix of sun and clouds and a chance of showers sometime later in the afternoon also, and we'll touch a high of 21.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Wet, wet, wet. Corey, the commute.
Yeah, really, so far a quiet commute. The only call I've gotten on the listen line is from a pedestrian, actually, who just wants to remind people not to splash pedestrians when they're walking down the sidewalk. She was walking down Corden with her dog and got the splash. So just heads up if you are in the curb lane there. Those puddles come out of nowhere, I know, but heads up if you see pedestrians, maybe slow it down. But if you see something else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's turn our attention to what I mentioned. Mexico's first woman president was declared Sunday night. Claudia Sheinbaum won the presidency with a majority, and quite a majority, between 58.3 and 60.7% of the vote. So this was decisive. Her victory represents a major step for Mexico. These were Mexico's largest ever elections, but also the most violent in modern history. And of course, violence against women is an ongoing issue in Mexico. My next guest moved to Winnipeg from Baja California 10 years ago. As you heard, Brenda Hernandez is also owner of La Panaderia, a Mexican bakery in Winnipeg. It's on Princess Street, but she's here to talk politics. She's been following what's been happening in the news in Mexico very closely. Good morning.
Good morning.
Officially. So how do you feel about Mexico's first woman president? What are your thoughts?
I feel very proud. This is a big step to look forward in Mexico. For me, this means like a more inclusive Mexico.
Mm-hmm. When you think about it in terms of her party, you feel proud because it's a woman president. But what about what she's going to bring party-wise?
Right now, I don't think I'm not a big fan of her party.
Okay.
But right now, I'm looking her as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking her colors, because if I look their colors have been making a lot of mistakes these past 6 years. I think all the Mexicans, we are hoping that she will bring the change that Mexico needs.
What kinds of things do you think Mexico needs? What are the changes that you really hope to see?
First of all, the women are looked first. It's a lot of insecurity for women in Mexico. Nobody pay attention to the feminicides. Hopefully she will be our voice there.
When you think about yourself as a Mexican woman, did you imagine that this day would come where you see a woman president being elected?
No, Mexico is a very misogynist country,
mm-hmm.
where all the men are the leaders. I never think that a woman will be capable to be a leader.
In terms of what you're thinking around I mentioned the violence on the campaign trail this year with the election. There's always a threat of drug cartel wars. I know Sunday it was reported 2 people were killed at polling stations in Puebla State. How do you feel about all that's happening in your home country as you watch this unfold? So this hope of this woman president, but then also all of this violence.
I don't know how to say, it's Mexico. We already have this violence, but I think, as you mentioned, this was our worst election. A lot of candidates was killed. This was the worst.
Yeah. I think there were over 30 candidates actually killed throughout the course of it, as you're saying. Why is having a female president important for women, not just all around the world, but for women who are still in Mexico?
I think this represents change. I believe her party broke Mexico into pieces, and she is the hope that all the Mexicans are waiting. As I told you, we are not seeing her as the colors that she's representing. We see her as a woman, as a capable, smart woman, that she will bring union to the Mexican people.
For people that don't follow politics, what is it about how her party governed that you're referring to, where you're like, I'm not a fan of her party, but
I will get a lot of enemies if I say what I think about.
Okay. You don't want to share?
No, because no. It's people that follow her party are very passionate. Like, you can love it or you can hate it, and I'm not on the love side.
Got it. What are the biggest issues that you see happening in Mexico beyond you were talking about alluding to violence against women and some of the cultural norms for men being the leaders and such? But what are the other issues for people in terms of what they're dealing with day to day in Mexico?
Right now, it's Mexico broken into pieces, like a big division: rich people, poor people, people that go to the university, people that doesn't have access. They make a big hole between those people. They separate people.
So huge division in terms of wealth.
Yeah.
In Mexico. Do you still have a lot of family there at all? I know we mentioned you've been in California 10 years and now here, but
My mom, my siblings.
yeah. Have you spoken to them since this election? I'm wondering what the responses are like there.
We are like opposite parties. Like, no. Okay. I'm happy because it's a woman. No, because I will get.
It's interesting. Everyone's happy because it's a woman. It's that significant. But
you can see the news. Like, everybody is talking about how important it's for Mexico. Nobody's talking about the mistakes that they make on the past. Like, right now, we are focused on her. You are a woman. You are a prepared woman. You are a very smart woman. Will be a hard job for her.
Just for people to have the context here, according to a CBC report, the number of women killed in Mexico is an average. It was in 2019, at least, from numbers from that year, was an average of 10 women a day killed due to violence. How hopeful are you that she'll be able to make a difference on that front? Violence against women.
Women need to be heard. Like, right now, if you go to the police to report a crime, they laugh at you. They are not prepared to. You are a woman. You provoke them. You don't have. Even when they say you have rights, you don't even have rights. It's like a lot of people, women are raped. If you go to the police, they will laugh at you.
Do you think that the violence against women and what's happening there is why she got so much percentage of the vote? Because, I mean, between 58.3 and 60.7% of the vote.
I don't think so. She has been the best dealing with women. She reject them a lot of, like, I think we have a very big feminist group back in Mexico, but she have been paying attention to them. I think it's more like because our actual president is very popular. That's why she win.
Well, we're going to see what happens next with her win. Brenda, thank you very much for coming in with your analysis and your opinion and thoughts on this morning on this historic election. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's Brenda Hernandez here, a Mexican Winnipegger living in Winnipeg now. She lived for 10 years in Baja California. She is also the owner of La Panaderia Mexican Bakery here in Winnipeg, down on Princess. we couldn't resist hearing a little of the Mariachi Ghost, of course, from here in Winnipeg with their Mexican roots. It is 7:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 9:90 a.m. on the app or YouTube. It is in Winnipeg, raining, gray, lots of rain to come in the forecast. 16 right now, warm and wet. Light rain in Brandon, also warm and wet, 14 degrees. Thompson sitting at 7 degrees currently, and that's your forecast. And you're expecting rain as well, a high of 13, but you're 60% chance of rain this afternoon up in Thompson, if that is where you call home. Well, next in the show, it's time for morning sports, and Scott Reguer is with us. Hello there.
Hey there, Marcy.
Let's start with hockey. Former Jets coach Paul Maurice is preparing for a tall task.
He is, with his relatively new team. The Florida Panthers getting set to face Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers Saturday, Marcy, for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are enjoying another fantastic postseason run. In fact, historically, those two average more than 1.5 points a game in the playoffs, which is why they sit in the top 4 in that category historically, alongside guys named Gretzky and Lemieux. So, Paul Maurice, how do you feel facing the Oilers superstars?
Well, we spent some time up there in Winnipeg, and we saw a bunch of different rotations, whether Leon Draisaitl plays with Connor McDavid or not, and that changes some of the dynamics of what you got to prepare for. But these two men, you can't play a one-on-one game with them. They're just too fast, too strong, too skilled. So it's a 5-man defensive game, and everything else that's going to come out of my mouth would be a cliche.
I love Paul Maurice. He jokes because he, never loses his sense of humor, but also because he has Sasha Barkov in his lineup. The Finnish forward, Marcy, is among the best defending forwards in the world. Case in point, while on the ice at even strength against Barkov, superstars Nikita Kucherov of Tampa Bay, then David Pastrnak of Boston, and then Artemi Panarin of the Rangers, all of them combined for just 2 goals. During these playoffs. There is a reason that Sasha Barkov just won the Selke Trophy as the top defensive player in the league, and he probably is the best on the planet right now. So that is one subplot with 4 more sleeps until the Stanley Cup Final begins in Florida on Saturday.
Let's go to baseball. The Blue Jays were up against one of the game's best teams last night.
They were the Baltimore Orioles, a team, Marcy, that has gone from irrelevant to relevant in very short order because of some of baseball's top prospects. But it wasn't a young superstar like Gunnar Henderson or Adley Rutschman last night doing the damage. It was the bottom of Baltimore's led by outfielder Austin Hayes and a couple of home runs that led them to victory. Jays manager John Schneider offered this backhanded compliment.
I don't want to sit here and say they're the 27 Yankees. They're not that good. They're a good team, So when you navigate the top, they're still big league hitters, Again, I'm not taking credit away from them. They've done a lot of really good things with both their young players and the guys that have been here. But still, you have to execute and navigate every single hitter.
Schneider went on to ask reporters, Marcy, not to make a headline of his reference to the 27 Yankees and their murderers' row batting order, including Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth. So, of course, we got to mention the fact that he did.
Mention it.
The Jays have a tall task tonight. They face Baltimore ace Corbin Burns. Toronto's going to counter with, we don't know yet. Alek Manoah had this turn in the rotation. He's hurt, and so it will be a reliever of some sort. The Jays, they're in a tough spell, let's face it. They're 3 games below 500 after that loss and at the bottom of the AL East. Meanwhile, better news. Locally in baseball, the Goldeyes won their opening game against the league-leading Kane County Cougars 7-2 last night. Joey Matulovic was excellent. He went 6 innings, struck out 8, didn't give up a single walk, actually. So the Goldeyes can get the series win tonight. First pitch is at 6:30 from Shaw Park.
So they might get a break in the rain that we've had. So
that would be a nice thing to see
if
that happens.
Need it. Let's finish with track and field in a big race for one of Canada's top Paralympians tonight.
Yeah, Victoria's Nate Reish, Marcy, is the world record holder in the 1,500 meters. He is in the T38 classification, which is for athletes with coordination impairments. The condition flares up at times. It did in March. It forced Reish to miss pretty much the entire month of training. So this evening, he is back. He will run in his first true race of the season at a meet in Guelph, Ontario. CBC is going to cover it beginning at just before 7 o'clock Central Time. It'll be live streamed. Reish, who's from Victoria, wants to set a world record again tonight. He says he doesn't want to just win this thing. He wants to be at his best before Paris. So we'll have a chance to watch him tonight.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott.
You betcha.
Talk to you tomorrow. Scott Reguer with Morning Sports. And we actually have a sports story coming up because today is Women's Golf Day. So after the news, we're going to take you out to Kildonan Park Golf Course where there's a healthy rivalry that happens a couple evenings a week. Stay with us. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. At 7:30, it is a wet Winnipeg. Rain is coming down. It's 16 degrees right now. The rain should end this morning, later this morning. There is still, though, a risk of a thunderstorm and a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon with a high of 21. Winnipeg Transit has made safety features available on all of its buses. Emergency video camera live streaming has been an option on 50 buses since 2021. Well, Transit has now enabled this feature on all 607 of its buses. A single button turns on the video cameras. They allow transit supervisors to view live camera feeds of emergency situations. Janice Lukes, the city councillor responsible for transit, says live streaming can result in faster decisions about deploying police and paramedics. She also says cameras make it easier to settle disputes.
You can get one person's interpretation of what happened, another person's interpretation. You can have the camera and you can take the actual information from the camera. You can validate it or cross-reference it to verbal discussions. So I think that is helping resolve situations.
The city's transit union says video streaming on buses is fine if it's used for emergencies and not to spy on bus drivers. Internal troubles at the Mountain View School Division in Dauphin have intensified after its superintendent was fired and 3 trustees quit days later. Stephen Jaddock was terminated as superintendent at a board meeting on Friday. 3 trustees submitted their resignations yesterday. 2 of them tell CBC the board's current environment has made it very difficult for them to represent students and communities properly. Board chair Gabe Mercier has a different take.
There was a power struggle between the old guard and, let's say, the new kids on the block. And so the people who resigned are actually the old guard.
Mercier says Jaddock was removed as superintendent because he wanted to change his salary. The Manitoba Métis Federation claims Jaddock was fired in part because he supported Dauphin's Pride Parade, which took place this past weekend. But Mercier says that is not true. An expert who assessed Jeremy Skibitsky's mental state is expected to testify today about those assessments. Dr. Sohom Das is a forensic psychiatrist, author, and YouTuber from the UK. He has interviewed Skibitsky twice since he was arrested in 2022. The Winnipeg man has admitted in a police video to killing 4 women, but his lawyers argue he's not criminally responsible because of a mental disorder. Lawyers spent yesterday discussing whether Das could provide expert testimony. Prosecutors questioned him on some of his YouTube videos, including one where he advised people not to confess if they've killed someone. In another video, which has since been removed, Das outlined ways to fake having a mental illness. Das says some of his videos are satire and are not meant to be taken seriously. Chief Justice Glenn Joyal says the videos do raise potential questions about Das's professionalism and credibility, but do not disqualify him from testifying. Well, Manitoba politicians were burning the midnight oil last night as they sat in the legislature past midnight. More than 20 bills going to a final vote before the legislature begins its summer break. Among those bills passed is one that makes it easier to seize property from suspected criminals by compelling them to provide details on unexplained wealth. Another new law ends the province's ban on homegrown recreational cannabis. Now, a major portion of the government's agenda, however, is going to have to wait until fall. An omnibus bill to enact the NDP government's budget measures is not going to a final vote until after the legislature reconvenes in October. The RCMP detachment in Manitoba's biggest northern city has 13 job vacancies. That's according to a policing report presented to Thompson's mayor and council last month. The regular roster for the detachment has 38 positions, but the current vacancies include 4 administrative positions, an inspector, a staff sergeant, and 7 constables. Thompson Mayor Colleen Smook says with a transient population in the Northern Hub and the large service area, demand for RCMP services is high.
When you're down 13 members between staff and office workers. It just means there's a lot more overtime. It's a lot more burnout. We go through more members that, just go to other places because it's less of a workload.
In an email to CBC, an RCMP spokesperson says the police service faces challenges with people retiring and transferring. A fed bear is a dead bear. That is the message Manitoba Conservation is trying to get across. A mother and cubs are becoming regulars along the highway north of Thompson. Grant White is a staff sergeant at Conservation. He says his office has received reports of people feeding the bears along the highway.
We seem to have some bears there that are quite friendly with the people along the roads. It looks like they're being fed as well. So it is common in different areas. I know people have good intentions, but in the long run, it's bad for the bears.
Feeding wildlife is illegal under the Provincial Wildlife Act. Anyone found guilty of an offence can be fined up to $25,000 or face 6 months in jail. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I'm going to attempt to take a photo, Heather, while it's through our window here. It's going to have raindrops all over it. But maybe that'll work because there's just someone standing outside our CBC window with the most beautiful floral umbrella.
So do umbrellas work when it's coming down this hard?
Absolutely not. But isn't that pretty? It really won't. Abby, it's just pouring out there, hey?
Yeah, it is pouring, and I don't think an umbrella is going to do it because sometimes it's, remember, because of that southwest breeze we're seeing, it might just be blowing it to the lower portion, even if the umbrella is covering the upper part of the body. So I think it's more of a weather that you need a coat. I call it a raincoat. This is what you need today. But if you want an umbrella, don't be like me. Try to remember to take it along when you're living wherever you visit. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at 16 degrees, rain downtown Winnipeg. This rain will stay with us throughout this early part of the morning. And then we will see a transition to mostly cloudy skies with a return later, we like a 60% chance of showers later. This afternoon, we're expecting a mix of sun and clouds with a risk of thunderstorm. The high will reach 21 today, and it's going to be with some breezy conditions. And tonight, we're going to expect partly cloudy skies. Heading west to Brandon, it's currently 14 degrees. Also, we're seeing showers, which will be ending late this morning, leading to a mix of sun and clouds. The high will be around 19 with windy conditions coming with that. Moving north to Thompson, it is 7 and cloudy. The forecast calls for mainly cloudy skies with a 60% chance of rain this afternoon and breezy conditions. High 13 degrees. Further north in Churchill, still at 0 with mist. Expect cloudy skies with 60% chance of morning showers and fog at times. And the high will reach +3 with breezy conditions. Down in Dauphin, it is 13. The showers will be ending this morning, followed by cloudy skies, and the high will reach 20 with breezy conditions also. Gimli is at 15 for the Interlake region. Rain will be ending late this morning. Then we'll see cloudy conditions, a 60% chance of showers sometime later with a risk of thunderstorm in the afternoon, high 22. Steinbach is at 16. The rain is also going to be ending late in the morning, and then a 60% chance of showers. And the afternoon will be bringing a mix of sun and clouds. Morris is at 17. The forecast for the Pembina Valley region today calls for rain ending late this afternoon, then with a risk of thunderstorm and a high of 21 with breezy conditions. In summary, Winnipeg, we are at 16. Rain this morning, transition to a mix of sun and clouds, and then we'll touch a high of 21.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
And right now, 16. And the commute, Corey, besides being crazy wet.
Yeah, well, Mars, I used to work at an outdoor goods store.
Yeah,
and
I do know this about you.
Yes, and when it was late in the shift, we were working the late shift, there was like 2 people in the store. We would get a little bored. We would announce fake products over to see how people react. So I'd be like, Marcy, there's a call for you on line 101, cycling umbrellas, line 101. And today's the kind of day you need a cycling umbrella. It was very fun.
No such thing. Super dangerous. Don't do it.
And people would look, be like, is that a thing? You could see the look on their face. It was very funny. But really, it has been pretty quiet out there commute-wise. A couple reports of people getting splashed while they're walking down the sidewalk from cars going by. So look out for pedestrians. But if you do see something else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
21 minutes to 8 o'clock on CBC. Well, you know what you can still do in the rain: golf.
Oh. It had to be the worst possible one yet. Yeah. You know how far that went?
How is this round going so far?
Oh, it's absolutely terrible.
Why do you say that?
Because I'm not doing very well.
But you're having fun.
Of course. It's golf.
What we're listening to there is a CBC's Jim Agapito in conversation with Jody Carruthers last night at the 5th hole at Kildonan Park Golf Course yesterday when it was under brighter skies. She and many others take part in the Monday Night Women's League. 71 golfers took to the greens last night in some friendly rivalry. Now, we're talking about it this rainy morning because it is Women's Golf Day. And women's golf is having a moment. If you follow it professionally, Nelly Korda, 5 wins in a row this season. And of course, Brooke Henderson leading the way for Canada. CBC's Jim Agapito wasn't just there to chat for a moment. He spent some time with a number of different golfers. He also spoke with 35-year-old Catherine Elam before she teed off.
I've been in this league for about 3 or 4 years now. It's a great way to spend the summer outside in all types of weather. We have so many beautiful courses and they're pretty affordable for most of the time. So it's fun. It's good exercise.
How long have you been playing golf for?
Probably like 12 years or so. I worked for a company that golf was kind of big on the pastime things, and I traveled around Western Canada a lot, so I'd always have my clubs with me, so I'd play just like little 9-hole courses in all the different little towns and everything, which was really fun.
So women's golf right now, they say, is having a moment.
I can definitely see that because I've been in ladies leagues for like the 12 years that I've been playing golf, and just the popularity of them and how many more there are and how many more ladies are golfing in them. Even this league seems to have expanded in the time that we've started playing in it. It's awesome. It just gives me more people to go golfing with that aren't my husband. Like ladies' night here is just amazing. There's so many women and all different calibers, and it's a nice girls' night out for us, right? Like less competition as golfing with some of the guys sometimes, so it's a little more relaxing. There's definitely internal competitions. Like we don't score ourselves against each other in our group, and we do ladies' eights once in a while just so we don't get too down on ourselves. You might as well pick your ball up and keep going instead of getting depressed. But at the same time, like we definitely compete against ourselves week after week, and we try and get better throughout the year, and we compare scores from last year to this year. And we are definitely always trying to win the competition every week.
If there's a lady out there that wants to get into playing golf, what advice would you give them?
Oh, just be patient. Don't worry about having a high score. Just pick up your ball and carry on to the next one. Don't get too down on yourself. We all have bad shots. You see the pros mess up a lot, which makes it's a humbling experience. So the next hole is a new hole. Start there again. I know there's some financial barriers for a lot of people, but it seems to be, with more people golfing, there's more used clubs, cheaper options, things like that people can slowly get into it. You don't need the brand new everything or the nicest course to play.
Out last night before the rain, CBC's Jim Agapito at Kildonan Park Golf Course talking to the Monday Night Women's League golfer there, Karen Elam. Jim also hung around the clubhouse and met some more people who played in the league. There's another league that plays most days of the week, in fact. They're called the Kildonan Park Monday Ladies Who Golf Club. They have members that range from ages 56 to 85. The league secretary, Cindy Glacken, spoke to Jim about what she thinks about women golf days.
It means that women have a place to play, an opportunity to play, celebrating the fact that we can go out and show off our skills, show our I want to say womanhood, but just it's a different game than the men's in a lot of ways, and more the social ability of it. So having that platform or that opportunity of having a day makes it even more present in mind, and hopefully inspires people to come out and golf, come out and watch. It can be happiness, it can be elation, it can also be humbling, it can be exhilarating, it can be kind of a feeling of camaraderie that the women are all out golfing. Yes, there's competition, yes, there's all kinds of other things that happen, but just the fact that you're out there with other women having the opportunity to golf, means everything.
My name is Anita Ducharme. We are always interested in increasing our membership, so my particular league, the Monday Ladies, who golf here, we got started in 2015. We started with 15 ladies, and now we're up to 45. So each year, we build and build and build, and basically through word of mouth. The beautiful thing about this league, there's also another one Wednesday, and then of course Monday evening. They all support a wide array of ages and abilities and things like that, so everybody is welcome, and so there's lots of support there. There's lots of learning and education and a lot of skill development, so it's naturally getting better, and it's naturally getting more enjoyable, and like the whole idea is to have a lot of fun, get engaged in different kinds of conversation about golf. Like, we play a bunch of different games. Today we played a game called Trouble, and there's lots of trouble out there because it's saturated. It's super soaker out there. So we have all kinds of comments coming from the ladies today.
Okay, you have to tell me, Trouble. What is Trouble?
It's just one game out of an entire spectrum of games to honor the different playing abilities of the women. So for instance, some women whiff a lot, some people three-putt, some people hit it out of bounds, and so what I did was develop a little schedule or score sheet with all of those different things happening and put a point value to them, and so whenever they got into trouble, they would accrue a certain number of points, and whoever gets the most number of points is the winner of the trouble game.
What got you into golf, and how long have you been playing for?
I've been playing golf off and on since I was 30 years old. Took a break to do team sports and then came back to golf. And that's the beautiful thing about golf, is it's a lifetime activity. And it's especially to play and to be involved in community, especially when you're retired. I mean, it's a lovely activity to be walking out in a park, and just getting involved in recreation activity and getting the body moving.
Dolores Matthews. I'm going to be 86 in July.
Okay, you played Trouble today. How did you do today?
I had a disaster day today. It was terrible.
But you're still smiling and you had fun.
You know what? I just love to be out. I like to walk. That's why I golf, because I just like being out and you meet different people. This is my first year golfing at Kildonan, and so far the ladies have been very nice and receptive, and I'm glad they're putting up with me, because I'm really having problems. Because I haven't golfed much for the last few years, so I'm just getting back into it. And I'm an old lady now, so.
Today is Women's Golf Day, and Jim Agapito was out last night at Kildonan Park talking to some members there, Dolores Matthews, as well as Anita Ducharme and Sidi Glacken. So if you want to sign up, by the way, for the Women's Municipal Golf Tournament, the City Tournament, it's at Windsor Park this year. It's the weekend of August 17th, and I can attest, having signed up for it and been in the tournament a couple of years, missed it last year. It's really fun, really supportive, but it is also really competitive. So none of this women's golf isn't competitive stuff all the time. There's many different entryways to get into the sport. It's been really, really fun for me to get into it myself all over the city. So check it out. August 17th is that tournament coming up. And if you've got a story about women's golf, you can call us. Let us know what your experience has been like golfing around Manitoba. 788-3205. How'd you get into it, and what was your best hole? I'll tell you about my hole-in-one after 8 on the show. True story. 11 minutes now to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. It's 16. There is rain in Winnipeg, and that's going to continue about 5 to 10 millimeters as we continue to remind you. Well, coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, we're going to continue our discussion about the rise of violence in classrooms against teachers. But our conversation today is going to be with a mother who says her son sometimes behaved violently during his time in school. What does she say is needed to improve the situation? That interview is coming up for you right here on CBC after 8. Next on the program, the University of Manitoba's president made a public apology for housing Indigenous artifacts and remains without consent. With First Nations and Indigenous leaders in attendance yesterday, Michael Benarash spoke about rematriation and repatriation of these items. Here's some of what he said.
For generations, colonial mindsets at our university have harmed and caused immense pain to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. For too long, we took, held, and wielded power that was not ours to begin with. We dehumanized Indigenous peoples to justify our behavior and failed to recognize their sovereignty and dignity. The University of Manitoba did not live up to its ideals in their true form. Today, we begin by atoning for these historic failures. We apologize for these past wrongs. We are sorry.
But the process of returning remains and artifacts is not an easy one. My next guest understands that. Patricia Dieter is the cultural historian for Pipikissis First Nation, which is about 88 kilometers northeast of Regina in Saskatchewan. She's currently on a one-woman mission, she says, to get her community's items back from museums. Now, some as far away as Chicago and Europe. And she's with us now. Hi there.
Good morning.
So just before we turn our attention to what you're working on, Patricia, what did you think and what do you think of the U of M apologizing and planning to return some, items to surrounding communities?
I really was moved by it. I'm really happy that was done. It may have come from the wrong person. I think it should have come from the Governor General of Canada, because it was really Canada that was at war with our communities, and to have a government person do this on their behalf, I think it needs to be stated louder that the entire Canadian state owes us an apology for what they did to our nation. And it's really nice to hear the staff working towards this and wanting to repatriate, but this is something that was done to our nation, and I think the nation of Canada should be required to apologize and to help us to get our objects back to our communities, to our homeland. I think that's the first step, I think, has been taken, though. So I'll say that about Manitoba. We almost have the same thing going on in Saskatchewan. We have the museum worker at Saskatchewan here in Regina has agreed to work with us to help us to bring back some of our objects. And so we're moving in the right direction, but it's slower than I would like to see.
Many of us know the term repatriation, but the University of Manitoba also spoke of rematriation. Can you educate us a little bit this morning about what that means?
I know matriarchal societies are very much a part of maybe Eastern Canada, not so much out here in the prairies. We did come from a patrilineal society because of the fur trade, I suppose. We had it for 200 years. But a lot of the objects in the museum are items that belong to women. There are beadwork, there are cradle boards, there are the teepee backrests. They were belongings of the home, with the teepee and everything inside it belonged to the women. So it could be that they're referring to, the belongings of women.
What's the effect of artifacts and remains not being in Indigenous communities? Like, what's the effect of having those being spread out and in places where they don't belong?
It's very hurtful. In southern Saskatchewan, I grew up here around Regina and Fort Capel area, and there's very little that you can look at that says that this was our homeland. My grandfather would tell me land sites when he was visiting the hills in LeBret, and also we have stories about Buffalo Pound, but there's no image or there's nothing there that shows that this is our homeland. This is where our people, not that long ago, this was our land, and it's nowhere. You have to go to a museum, and it looks like it's, they hardly have anything in our museums as well. When you look at what's on site at the Field Museum in Chicago, and also what's at Washington, D.C., you see these beautiful painted teepees and awesome regalia and all kinds of crafts that they were making, and we don't have them. Our kids can't see them. And so to me, that's so sad for my children not to be able to see these things. And all of our community members don't have access to them. So
You mentioned Chicago just now, Patricia. I mentioned Chicago as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about items you've been able to identify that belong to your community that you're working to return to where you live in Pipikisis in Saskatchewan?
Okay, when I was doing my historical research, I was noticing that anthropologists had come out to my reserve as early as 1893, that the Indian agents and the Canadian government were inviting these people to come and see the last of the dying Cree. That's what they called them, the last of the dying race. That's what they were referring to people on my reserve like that. One of these guys that came out was a person that was collecting hair samples for the, I think it was for the World Exposition that was held in 1893 in Chicago. And he collected hair samples, not only from my community, but from other Cree reserves. And so a letter was sent to my chief saying that they wanted to return these hair pieces. And I'm like, oh, he asked me to respond to it. And so I did. And I also sent a letter asking them about what other anthropologists had taken from my reserve besides the hair samples. They had also a person by the name of Isaac Cowie has a collection there that were taken from Saskatchewan and also probably the Alberta area, as well as Stephen Sims was another person that acquired things in 1903 from my reserve. And like I said, he was encouraged by the Indian agent to take things. So we know large collections are in Chicago, and they confirmed it with a listing of what was out there.
Thank you very much for being with us and shedding light on what's happening and how in your work to try to repatriate some of these items to your community and looking at the development here in Manitoba. Appreciate having you with us on CBC.
Well, thank you very much.
That is Patricia Dieter. She's the cultural historian and band member of Pipikisis First Nation in Saskatchewan. She's in the process, as you heard, of bringing artifacts and remains home from museums in Saskatchewan, the U.S., and Europe. And of course, this conversation was prompted by what happened yesterday. The University of Manitoba's president making a public apology for housing Indigenous artifacts and remains without consent. You can read more about the story and the story here in Manitoba as it develops at cbc.ca/Manitoba on our website. Speaking of developing stories, Heather Wells is now back with our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, internal troubles at the Mountain View School Division in Dauphin are intensifying after the superintendent there was fired and 3 trustees quit days later. We'll hear what's been happening coming up. And the RCMP detachment in Manitoba's biggest northern city has 13 staff vacancies. That is according to a policing report presented to Thompson's mayor and council last month. The mayor of Thompson, Colleen Smook, says with a transient population in the northern hub and a large service area, demand for RCMP services is high. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, as we continue to tell you, it's raining pretty hard. It's going to continue 5 to 10 millimeters, a high of 21 degrees. 16 right now in Winnipeg. On the morning drive, just keep the wipers on high. Don't splash pedestrians. Slow down through all those construction zones and all the regular advice. Otherwise, we don't have anything major to report, but call us if you're having a problem with your commute, 788-3093, and we'll pass it along on air here. In the next hour of Information Radio, coming up after 8, last week we did talk to the Manitoba Teachers Society about the rise in classroom violence against teachers. But this morning, we're going to hear from a family, a mother who says she has experience with that issue from another perspective. She says her son sometimes behaved violently during his time in school. Her thoughts on what she says needs to change to help both teachers and students. Stay tuned. That's coming up after 8 in our ongoing conversations about this issue. Right now, the World Report is next on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Stay with us right here on CBC.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
You might know Dan Brown from writing best-selling books like The Da Vinci Code, but did you know he's also a musician? Dan put out a kids book tied to classical compositions he wrote, and now he's performing it with a New Brunswick Kids Orchestra. He'll be here to talk to you about music and why New Brunswick.
I mean, these people are making a change. I said, well, how can I possibly say no?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
This season, we have been looking at wellness, what works, what doesn't, and what's a waste of money. Today, a whole program devoted to wellness of body and mind with takeaways for your daily life. That's coming up on a special edition of The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The latest report into foreign interference in Canadian elections is sending shockwaves through Ottawa, and we are watching to see what Justin Trudeau's cabinet ministers have to say as they meet this morning. The report from a committee of MPs and senators found some politicians were knowing participants in foreign election meddling. Let's go to our parliamentary reporter, Janice McGregor. And Janice, you have been reading this report closely. What stands out the most?
Marcia, the chair of Parliament's National Security Committee, David McGuinty, told CBC News they agonized over what to say, specifically about their fellow parliamentarians who are, in the words of CSIS, witting participants, helping foreign governments meddle. Things like talking to foreign missions around campaigns to mobilize community groups or businesses that the diplomats are engaged with, accepting funding where the actual foreign source of the money is concealed, and perhaps most troubling, giving information to a known foreign intelligence officer. No charges have been laid, but the report notes that at least some of it could be illegal were authorities to crack down on it. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc told Power and Politics last night, this goes beyond what he can control as a government minister.
I'm not able to police the calendar of some MP or senator who decides to have a meeting with a foreign diplomat.
This report also gave us more detail about India's meddling than we've got at the public inquiry so far. It describes how CSIS has tracked a known Indian proxy that claims to have transferred money from India to politicians at all levels of government in return for what was described as political favors. And yet, this information apparently has never been shared with the RCMP or elections investigators.
We also learned about more meddling in another political process, the selection of a politician who could become the next Prime Minister of Canada. Tell us about that.
Now, it's significantly redacted, but this report reveals that there were two specific instances where the People's Republic of China had officials that were interfering in leadership races, plural, of the Conservative Party. And another instance where CSIS alleges that India interfered in the Conservative leadership race. A representative from the committee that ran that race told CBC News last night the party did not get any reporting from the government about foreign interference. Conservative Party spokesperson Sarah Fisher said CSIS did not advise of any evidence about this. And this NSICOP report apparently is the first they've heard about it.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. And in the U.S., a new border measure is expected to be signed into law today. It would restrict access to migrants seeking asylum from Mexico. U.S. President Joe Biden has been under pressure to toughen his stance on border security. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what do we know?
Yeah, this appears to be a major policy change from the White House and a political 180 for President Joe Biden. So later this morning, he's expected to sign an executive order that would temporarily shut down asylum seekers entering the southern border, using the same powers he once denounced that were used by his predecessor, former President Donald Trump. Now, under this plan, U.S. immigration officials can deport migrants without processing their asylum claims once illegal crossings exceed roughly 3,000 per day. Claims would then reopen when that number falls. Now, officials caution details are still being finalized, but a key Biden ally and Democratic Senator Chris Murphy admits the plan will almost certainly be challenged in court.
The president has such limited ability to issue executive orders that would have an impact on the border. He can't conjure resources out of thin air. If he were to try to shut down portions of the border, the courts would throw that out, I think, within a matter of weeks.
So officials say roughly 4,000 migrants are crossing illegally per day, which suggests this shutdown could take effect the moment the president signs the order.
Richard, how might this change things in the election?
Well, I think it suggests that Biden's campaign is hoping to neutralize the issue and say he's taking action, because this appears to be a recognition that Biden's handling of the border has become a major liability with voters, while being a rallying cry for his opponent, Donald Trump. Senate Republicans, you'll recall, blocked a similar deal, forcing the White House to go this route. So Biden's campaign is looking to show that they're taking action ahead of the first presidential debate, which happens about 3 weeks from now.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Opening statements begin today in the federal case against Hunter Biden. He is the first child of a sitting U.S. president to face a criminal trial. Jury selection was completed yesterday in a Delaware court. Hunter Biden is facing 3 charges related to the purchase of a gun in 2018. Prosecutors allege he lied about his drug use during his application for the weapon. He has pleaded not guilty to the gun charges. Votes are being counted today in India's general election. Early results showed the alliance led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi will win, but the margin is much smaller than expected. Modi is heading towards a 3rd consecutive government, but the opposition Congress Party has also made gains. Our correspondent Chris Brown is tracking the results.
As Indians gather around TV sets to watch the election results, some commentators are having trouble containing themselves, as it appears Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP will fall far short of the landslide win his party had predicted. Indeed, Modi's coalition may even end up with fewer seats than it went in with. In Delhi, 79-year-old Viren Gupta voted for Modi, but he likes the outcome.
The good opposition for the India. That is very good opposition.
Chitigi Vajpayee is with the Chatham House think tank in London.
It's not great news for the BJP, but I think it is good news for India as a whole, as it reaffirms the country's democratic credentials.
Throughout Modi's 10 years of rule, he's been accused of inflaming religious divisions in India by advocating a Hindu nationalist agenda and calling Muslims infiltrators.
So I think we could see some attempts to try and curtail or pull back on some of the more divisive identity-driven politics if we see a weaker coalition government return to power.
It appears the India Alliance opposition, which includes a Congress party that ruled India for decades, made significant gains, even as some of its leaders campaigned from jail and its bank accounts were frozen. Modi is credited with spurring India's remarkable economic growth and enhanced clout on the world stage. And while his 3rd straight mandate is historic, his opponents will also interpret these results that he's far from invincible. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Low water levels are threatening a seasonal transportation lifeline for a community in Northwest Territories. People living in Fort Simpson use a local ferry to cross the Liard River. But given the lack of water, the territorial government wants to dredge a section of the river. They say it may be the only way to keep the ferry moving. Kate Kyle reports.
The MV Lafferty chugs across the Liard River, delivering vehicles, passengers, and supplies. The 10-minute voyage is the only way to reach Fort Simpson this time of year, other than flying.
It's really our only connection.
Record low water levels on the Liard River worry Fort Simpson Mayor Sean Welly.
We're starting at a much lower level, so they're expecting that by fall time, there could be a much earlier shutdown.
The territorial government is proposing dredging a section of the Liard River in August, clearing 8,000 cubic meters of sediment and boulders near the ferry landings. Jacqueline Demers is a superintendent with the Department of Infrastructure.
We're hoping this work will help us to maintain operations late in the season, and will also protect damage to the vessel.
Water levels are slowly climbing from mountain snowmelt. Territorial hydrologist Ryan Connon says there's still good reason to be prepared.
In the absence of significant rain or significant precipitation, they could start decreasing early.
Mayor Sean Welly says dredging isn't enough.
But they need to be taking a look at forward steps towards a possible bridge across the Liard as well. Climate change is not going to get better.
The territorial government is planning a depth survey to better understand what's below the Liard River in case they have to dredge deeper. Kate Kyle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
This Thursday, June 6th, is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It was a turning point in the Second World War when Canadian, American, and British troops stormed the beaches of Normandy. CBC Radio will have special coverage commemorating the day. Hosts Nala Ayed and John Northcott will bring you highlights from the official ceremony on Juno Beach and interviews with living veterans who were on the beach 80 years ago. This is this Thursday on CBC Radio 1 at 1 p.m. local time. You can also watch the ceremony live at 1 a.m. Pacific on CBC News Network Explore, CBC Gem, or YouTube. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, the rain is not letting up. Just when you think it's taking a pause, it just comes back in another wave. It's going to be wet, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us. This is CBC. You're with Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Good morning, everyone. More in the forecast in a moment, and it's not just wet in Winnipeg, of course. Across southern Manitoba, we're seeing these showers. This half hour on the show, we're going to continue a series of conversations we're having. Manitoba Teachers Society was on the show last week. They were talking about the rise in classroom violence against teachers. But this half hour on the program, we're going to talk to a mother who says her son sometimes behaved violently during his time in school. What does she say is needed to improve the situation for both students and for teachers? So stay tuned, we'll have her story. And it's Women's Golf Day. We're going to hear some stories about that. In the last half hour, CBC's Jim Agapito, we heard out at Kildonan Park Golf Course, which is wet this morning. Right now, let's go to news headlines. Heather Wells is in from our news center. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg Transit has made a safety feature available on all of its buses. Emergency video camera live streaming has already been an option on 50 buses since 2021. Transit has now enabled this feature on all 607 buses. A single button turns on the video cameras, allowing transit supervisors to view live camera feeds of emergency situations. Well, Manitoba politicians may be bleary-eyed this morning. They sat past midnight as more than 20 bills went to a final vote before the legislature began its summer break. We'll tell you what passed and what is going to have to wait until fall. Coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adeyemi is the man with the forecast.
Rain, rain, rain. That's what we're seeing outside. 16 still in Winnipeg. We're expecting the rain to be with us for the early part of this morning, and then we'll see a transition to mostly cloudy skies, but hold it because we still have a 60% chance of showers to come sometime later. Now, by this afternoon, you can look forward to a mix of sun and clouds. There's also risk of a thunderstorm late in the morning into the afternoon period, and today's high will reach 21 degrees. It will be breezy during the day also, with that winds shifting from the southeast to the southwest. Tonight, partly cloudy. We should expect cloudy skies tonight, and we'll dip down to a low of 14. In Winnipeg, 16 degrees. We're starting off the day with a rainy condition, turning to a mix of sun and clouds, and by afternoon, we should be getting to a high of 21.
Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey, the commute's fine?
And so far, commute has been fine. Pretty quiet out there. But if you're walking, biking, driving, I've seen a lot of people doing it out of the window here. Lots of people getting wet. I saw someone walking their baby totally covered in the carriage. Someone carrying a big box. People are still getting about their day. If you do see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Look at that dog across the street on Portage Ave. Do you think he's actually like pressing against the building to try to stay under it even out of the rain?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know what he's doing over there. Well, speaking of rain and speaking of golf, I love the sport, Corey, because it's something that you can still play in the
Sure
rain.
is.
Although it's been a little bit difficult this year. It's been so wet.
Yep.
It's Women's Golf Day. We heard from some golfers out of Kildonan Park in the last half hour about how the sport is having a moment. But it also is a sport that is encouraging always growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't start golfing till a number of years ago with my husband, and really enjoy it, love it. Although there's a point of annoyance when it comes to golf stories that I have to share locally.
Okay.
Is that my husband, for all of his golf prowess, has never had a hole-in-one. And you know who has?
Really?
Right here.
Wow.
Okay, total fluke. Hole number 9 in Tuxedo, had completely the wrong club. Didn't know what I was doing. I think it was like the first or second year I golfed. But Plunkett went up. It was also rainy. And then the ball, we couldn't see it. And I'm like, that was right on line. I was so excited. But then we came up to the green, couldn't see it. So it was raining like it is this morning. Puddles everywhere. And Jean-Paul, my husband, starts going, well, maybe it's in a puddle. So we're scooping with our clubs. Nothing. Finally, I'm like, well, that's annoying, but fine. I'll drop a ball. So drop a ball. I hit the ball. We get up to the tee. And we're on the green and we look. He putts his in. I'm going for my putt and he goes, oh my, your ball's in the hole.
What?
It must have gone straight up and straight down into the hole.
Like you planned.
Yeah, just like I planned. They sent me a certificate and everything.
Really?
I was so excited. Apparently, I was supposed to keep the ball. I learned after. Everyone's like, well, keep the ball. And you know what I mean? But I was so excited that the next hole, I completely shot the ball straight into the water. I was just, I was way too excited to continue playing.
Was it a par 3, 4, or 5?
The one I got the hole on and went on, it was a par 3.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I had way too much club, but it worked out.
Nice.
Women's Golf Day, the municipal tournament, if you're interested in the sport locally and looking for affordable ways in. A lot of city courses around town, by the way, is coming up later this summer. It's on August 17th. Well, as I mentioned, we are continuing our discussion about classroom violence this morning. The Manitoba Teachers Society last week on air told us that violence against teachers has been a growing concern. MTS President Nathan Martindale was on. He says there's been a lack of funding for teachers and EAs to help support kids with special needs, and that's part of what he sees as the challenge.
And some of those student needs are the fact that some students need support in the classroom, whether that's an EA working with them in the classroom or access to clinicians. So over the years, there's been less clinicians, less support for these students, as well as less EAs. So that is one of the reasons that's led to a rise in violent incidents in the classrooms.
But there are, of course, other issues at play here. And my next guest is here to weigh in from a different perspective. Audra Lecheslaw is a family networking coordinator with Family Advocacy Network of Manitoba. She's also a mother of 2, and one of her sons lives with autism. Now, he's 21 years old. He's out of school. But Audra says that her son's time in the public school system in Manitoba at times was a real struggle. And at times, he would become violent in his classroom. Good morning, Audra.
Good morning, Marcy.
Thank you for being here and weighing in.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your son and his autism and how his behavior was a challenge in a traditional classroom setting.
For Adam, he has autism and he is nonverbal. So his behavior is his communication. And so it's very important that he has staff that are competent and trained on autism to understand how to support him. And
what does that mean? Tell me a bit about sort of the triggers. Tell me a bit about your son.
Yeah, Adam has autism, but he also has sensory processing disorder. So his brain has a very, very hard time processing sensory stimuli. So for Adam, he wears ear defenders. Smells will affect him. It's quite severe. He actually will sleep with defenders on. That's how loud the world is for him.
So in a classroom setting, I know you have this, my producer shared with me who was speaking with you off air, there's a story about even something like a hole punch. That would happen. That could be an issue, right?
Yeah, and if the teachers don't have the training or the EAs, and I have talked to a teacher that recently graduated, and we there still isn't enough education at that level. So when I have a teacher, approach me in the hallway, Adam's, lashed out at me and what's going on, and so when I do the kind of the fact finding about it and find out that she was hole punching by his desk. That's something that will startle Adam, and it could have been probably something that he couldn't predict. So he would have went into flight or fight, and that's where he can't communicate. So he's looking for a safe space, and unfortunately, objects can be thrown or people can be hit. And as a family, it affected us as much. Every time I would be told something would happen like that, it affected us immensely as a family, because I knew that's not who Adam was. It was just Adam trying to navigate his way in our school system.
When was the first time you heard about him having issues at school around sort of becoming violent in the classroom?
I think it was actually very young. He was on grade 2, and it was the hole punching incident. And trying to explain to people the sensory processing disorder, whether people believe it or they don't, it is a real thing.
People question you about this?
Yeah, I've seen support staff take away kids' ear defenders. They just need to get used to it.
Is what you're told.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel as a parent? Because there's a lack of understanding in education. That contributes to stigma.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me want to share my story more. It wants me to help educate people more on autism or whatever disability your child may have. Because it is the only way. And I mean, I brought in several programs, puppet play, one of the puppets had autism, or like even a sensory processing game. And it showed people what, Adam's day looks like. And people were overwhelmed. And it was like, hey, this is my boy's life. So he needs his ear defenders.
If he lashed out at teachers over the years, like would that happen regularly?
In the earlier years, not so much. But in the later, when our kids' bodies are changing and they start going through the puberty, it's a tough time for our kids. Now they're trying to figure out all this stuff that's happening. And so I feel like the incidents happened more.
And would he, I'm just trying to get a sense of what he would do. So we talked about the hole punch issue, but that issue or another one, would he throw things or actually hit?
Throw things, pull hair, pinch. Yeah, he's been through a lot. I mean, and in his defense, I mean, at one time it was suggested that he would be on a leash. So you could just imagine what that did to my son's, what that felt like for my son to be in a school system where he would be put on a leash, and that was to teach him distance so that he did not pinch. So it wasn't looked at why was my son doing this type of behavior. It was more trying to, I guess, and I don't point fingers at anybody. I believe that we all have to work together to figure this out together. And parents play an important part of the table, and they should be number one at the table.
How hard is it to be the parent at the table of the child who's being disruptive and violent, but also to be the parent at the table who's now been told maybe the solution's a leash? And it's so glaring that we have, a gap in understanding education and how to do better out of this. Like, what's that like for you?
I feel a lot of different emotions. So I can get, we can be angry, we can get mad. But I look back at the history and I try to, always look at the other side of the table, and I try to understand. And I see the teachers with 20-something kids in their classrooms, and I see EAs not getting proper training. The training will be higher, whereas it's the EAs that are working, one-on-one. And I've seen EAs with my son that the physical ability, like, I don't know what they were thinking, people that didn't have the physical ability to work with my son. My son's very athletic and very fit and tall. And so he needs staff with him that can match his physical ability.
So they can physically deal with him if they need to hold him back, so to speak, if something escalates.
Yeah, so that was the hardest part, I think, is seeing people put in those positions to support my son that I just go home and literally cry because I knew what the phone call was going to be.
So we talked about some of the gaps in the school systems and responses over the years with your son, Adam. But Can you talk about a time where the school responded in a way where you went, this is working, or there is enough staff, or did you have positive experiences in the school system?
I think so. I mean, and I don't mean to point fingers. I mean, the school systems that Adam was in, they really tried hard. Really tried hard. We worked for a couple of years getting a sensory room built for Adam. That was huge in his success.
So that builds on sort of the fact that this is not just about the training. We understand maybe more EAs, but this is not just really where the solutions stop.
Right.
There's other things. So the sensory room, what else helped?
The sensory room helped a lot. More life skills, doing things. I mean, Adam is not going to learn math. He's not going to learn algebra. So more life skill things like he likes to do, cooking and baking and outings, going to a store to, learn money, how to, and stuff like that. I think more life skills and I've seen lots of schools turn away from that. And I'm like, whatever you can say the words segregation, you can say inclusion, you can say, but at the end of the day, it's where our loved ones do well.
Adam actually ended up at St. Amant Center. Was he taken out of the school system?
Yes.
Yeah. And what age was he when that happened?
13.
13, you made that choice. How's he doing now? We mentioned he's 21, so he's an adult now. You're reflecting on things.
Yeah.
But how's he doing?
He's doing really well. He is living in the community in a home, and he is supported by an agency that understands low arousal, and it's something I can't say it enough. And so he's in a very stable environment, predictable environment, and he is who he is. And Adam hasn't changed. He's still the funny, quirky little boy when he was 2 years old. So,
do you think that if some of the things were to change in the school systems around the solutions we've been talking about, that you may have kept him in the school system?
Absolutely. A big thing would have been if I had had FAN, the Family Advocacy Network. I mean, back then I was navigating by myself. The guilt that we carry, trying to Google and figure out what would help. I think if I had FAN and I had a network of other parents living, sharing similar lived experience, that would have been absolutely 100%. I think things would have been different. And that's why I believe in this network of parents, because it's our collective voice that are going to help making these changes.
I understand that part of that network, at least I hope I'm understanding this correctly, part of that network is even so parents can connect with each other.
Yes.
I know what it's like to be a parent, you would say. Maybe you'd even write letters to each other to support each other.
Yeah, we do that, and we'll come with parents to sit in school meetings. So, because a lot of times you'll go into a school meeting, there'll be one.
That's
and
amazing.
then so we're going to be there. We're going to be there for support. We're going to be helping, taking notes.
How would you like to change the language even in these conversations when you think about kids like your son, Adam, in terms of, we say, the violent student or the,
I don't like, those labels are tough on us families, and I get it, but I think there's a reason behind it, and that's what we really need to start looking at is why is this happening? I don't think anyone wakes up thinking, I'm going to be violent today. I think, with sensory processing that many of these children have, it's a battlefield. The psychiatrist told me, Audra, this is a battlefield that your son, when he wakes up in the morning, that he goes through. So he's like a little volcano, and when there's too much stress, this is going to happen. He's going to have an outburst.
Appreciate you being with us on CBC, Audra. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mercy.
That's Audra Lacheslaw, parent of a child who lives with autism. Well, not a child anymore, talking about his experiences when he was now 21 years old. But this is part of our ongoing conversation about violence in the classrooms and how we can do better to support students, families, and teachers in the system. Audra is also, as you heard, a family networking coordinator with the Family Advocacy Network of Manitoba. Check them out. Find them. They're called FAN.
Every company dreams of doubling its profit. It's almost impossible to do. Yet, some companies do it just by tweaking one tiny thing. Or coming up with a really catchy jingle.
Flop, flop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is.
Flop, plop, fizz, fizz. how companies double their profits on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland and on the CBC Listen app.
Time right now is 8:28, and we've got a small traffic note. I'll get to that in a moment. First, Janet Stewart's here to tell us about the calling conversation on Radio Noon today.
Hi, good morning, Marcy.
Morning.
Today in our calling conversation, starting after the 12:30 news, we're going to talk about heart and stroke because it is Heart and Stroke Month. Heart and Stroke Foundation put out a study today showing how the incidence of stroke is growing and heart disease. It wants to make sure that everybody understands the warning signs and what to do. So our calling conversation, we ask, how has heart disease and stroke impacted your life? How has it impacted your life? I know it's impacted mine. The number to leave a message now is 204-788-3797.
All right. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
The traffic note, I just want to turn to what I mentioned here. Dave called westbound South Perimeter right now. Dave's description is a parking lot. Now, this is because of construction around St. Mary's. I saw this over the weekend. It gets backed up fast. So it goes down to one lane. It is now backed up all the way to St. Anne's. Thank you, Dave, for the call. If you see any other problems, please call our traffic line. That's 788-3093. You're with CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. And your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is raining. It's 16 degrees. The rain should end later this morning, and then we'll have a mix of sun and clouds for part of the afternoon and a high today of 21. Winnipeg Transit has enabled video live streaming on all buses as an emergency feature. Since 2021, drivers on 50 transit buses have been able to hit a button to allow transit supervisors to view live camera feeds of emergency situations. Transit has now enabled that feature on all 607 buses. Janice Lukes, the city councillor responsible for transit, says live streaming can make it easier for transit to deploy police, paramedics, or supervisors.
There's issues on the transit buses from time to time on certain routes. And what this does is it allows Transit's control center to also see what's going on and ensure the proper emergency services are dispatched.
The city's transit union says video streaming on buses is fine if it's used for emergencies and not to spy on bus drivers. Internal trouble at the Mountain View School Division in Dauphin has intensified after its superintendent was fired and 3 trustees quit days later. Stephen Jaddock was terminated as superintendent at a board meeting Friday. 3 trustees submitted their resignations yesterday. 2 of them tell CBC the board's current environment has made it very difficult for them to represent students and communities properly. Board Chair Gabe Mercier sees it a different way.
There was a power struggle between the old guard and, let's say, the new kids on the block. And so the people who resigned are actually the old guard.
Mercier says Jaddock was removed as superintendent because he wanted a change to his salary. The Manitoba Métis Federation claims Jaddock was fired in part because he supported Dauphin's Pride Parade, which took place last weekend, but Mercier says that is not true. Manitoba MLAs worked late into the night, sitting past midnight as more than 20 bills went to a final vote before the legislature began its summer break. Among the bills passed is one that makes it easier to seize property from suspected criminals by compelling them to provide details on unexplained wealth. Another new law ends the province's ban on homegrown recreational cannabis. A major portion, though, of the government's agenda will carry over to fall. An omnibus bill to enact the NDP government's budget measures isn't going to a final vote until after the legislature reconvenes in October. You can read more about which bills passed late last night, early this morning. Just head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. The Liberal government's Pharma Care bill is headed to the Senate in Ottawa after passing in the House of Commons last night. The plan is to start offering diabetes drugs and contraceptives and eventually offer more medication. Kevin Lamoureux is a Liberal MP from Manitoba.
If you have diabetes in Canada, you can anticipate medications at no cost, whether you live in Halifax, Montreal, Quebec City, Winnipeg, Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver. That is the idea of having a national program.
The National Pharmacare Plan was part of the supply and confidence deal between the Liberals and NDP to keep the minority government alive. Everyone in 5 positions in the Thompson RCMP detachment is unstaffed, including 2 leadership positions and 7 officers. Thompson's mayor, Colleen Smook, says the Manitoba's northern hub has one of the largest RCMP contingents per capita because of the unique landscape of the north.
We're only a community of 13,000, but we're a service area for approximately 65,000. So when you have a lot of transient population in using our services in town, there's a lot more demand for the RCMP services.
In an emailed statement to RCMP, an RCMP spokesperson says vacancy rates are only, quote, a snapshot in time. And with transfers, promotions, retirements, and new recruits, the numbers change frequently. Feeding bears on the highway doesn't help the animal. It hurts them. That is the message conservation officers are trying to get across in northern Manitoba. This as a mother bear and cubs have been spotted along Highway 391 in north of Thompson. The furry family's been reported to be too friendly with people who are giving them food. Grant White is a staff sergeant at Manitoba Conservation.
If people want to help the bears, and everybody wants to help wildlife, there's better ways of doing it. You could keep our forests clean, keep things cleaned up along the roads, places like that. And if they want to help, they're better off to donate some money to different user groups out there.
White says if people stop feeding the bears now, they will eventually move on and become self-sufficient in the forest. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you got to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Thank you to our news department for the morning, Heather Wells and Joni Nicolo and Megan Ketchison. Thanks to our team here, Kevin Nipatebo, as well as Corey Funk and Brad Lillies and Abby Adiyemi, our hardworking team of associate producers, and our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. With a last look at the traffic report, here is Corey.
Yeah, just got a call from Mike. Westbound Fermor, just west of Archibald. There's a stalled car in the median lane. Keep right to get around that. Slow going in general, he says, on westbound Fermor as well. Westbound South Perimeter. Dave says it's a parking lot because of that construction at St. Mary's backed up all the way to St. Anne's.
Abby.
We've got rain all morning and it's going to be ending later this morning. Then we'll see clouds roll in. Other regions in the province experiencing rainy starts also with breezy conditions. Temperatures would range from 0 in Churchill to 22 in Gimli.
Get the phone. It's ringing. Always rings at the end of the show. We know we leave you in lineups. Thank you so much for listening this morning. Hopefully you get where you're going promptly once you get through the various areas that are backed up, as Corey mentioned. And take care, be well, and we will be back again tomorrow with another edition of Information Radio. The Current is coming up next, and a small mention that Thursday morning we're live in Point Douglas. The city's doing a neighborhood plan for one of the city's oldest neighborhoods, so we're going to hear more about what is needed there. So we're going to be live at Norquay School. Right now, though, The Current on CBC. Take care, everyone.